Okay, it is 6:30. Good evening, everyone. A few notes for you, particularly if this is your first meeting with us. You'll notice that you are muted and unable to mute yourself. After any presentations, the co-chairs may call on members of the public who wish to speak. You can ask to be recognized by raising your virtual hand. You can do that by going to the reactions button at the bottom of your screen and selecting raise hand. It's important not to raise your physical hands or wave at the screen because we may not be able to see you among the participants. If you are on the phone, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 and *6 to unmute. Once you're recognized by the co-chair, I will unmute you and you may be prompted to confirm unmuting on your device. If you're using an older version of Zoom, you can access the raise hand feature by clicking the participants button on the menu at the bottom of your screen and selecting raise hand. The chat function is available for technical support only, not to ask questions of the co-chairs. You can send me a chat if you're having any trouble and I can walk you through any issues you may be having. Alita?
Thank you so much, Saida. Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Joint Small Business Sanitation, Zoning and Development, and Transportation and Street Life meeting on the Open Restaurants program, preceded by a joint sanitation and small business portion devoted to the sanitation rules as they apply to small businesses and small businesses and restaurants. The point of the earlier part is to make it easier for small businesses and restaurants to understand and grasp the rules because fines or other penalties might be associated with a failure to comply. And then we will move into the rest of it, followed by old business and new business. Each chair or pair of chairs from each of the committees will have 5 or fewer minutes to present the rules as they currently apply. And after the sanitation and small business portion on the rules, we'll have a brief update of what happened with the Article 78 proceeding that was filed in court, and then move on from there. If you have any questions, you'll be able to raise your hand, and we will call first, as Saida mentioned, on members of the public and then on board members. And I thank everyone for coming. These are important topics, and both for understanding the rules and for discussion about the open restaurant rules and what might happen. Okay, so at this point, I will say that we have Joan Burns from the Department of Sanitation, and I will turn it over to Kaz to handle this part as one of the co-chairs of the Sanitation Department. Not the Sanitation Department, sorry, I elevated you there, but one of the co-chairs of the Sanitation Committee. Thank you, Kaz.
Thanks, Alida. Well, over the past couple of years with the open restaurant, the restaurants have been rightly or wrongly accused of extra garbage, vermin, and goodness knows what. Whether that's true or not, I'm not sure. But if we can have Director Joanne Burns explain to us what is required of the restaurants. We know that the building is required to keep the sidewalk clean, but what do we as restaurant owners need to do, need to know, and need to, help with the cleaning?
If I could just interject for 1 second, if there are any differences with storefronts or other types of small businesses, Joan, if you could do that as well. And thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here. Unfortunately, Chief Harbin, who was supposed to be here with me tonight, was called away at the last minute for something else. But I did prepare a little presentation to go over a whole bunch of different cleaning and collection things. Would you be okay with me going through that, or do you just want me to talk specifically to the open restaurants part?
No, I think it would help. Will can help you share the screen if you need to.
Okay. You should be available to.
Yeah, and the general rules for small businesses as well is useful. The rest of the meeting will be about questions and comments on the open restaurant program, but this is helpful for any small businesses that might be here. Thank you, Joan.
Yeah, my pleasure. So can you see my screen?
Yes.
Part of it. There we go.
Okay, so you're seeing just the slide, avoiding violations for businesses?
Correct.
Yes.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about cleaning and the responsibilities there. So Businesses are all required to clean 18 inches into the street. Not supposed to block the sidewalk. Required to clear ice and snow from in front of the business, and to advertise correctly. So, we're not allowed to put advertisements on telephone poles or trees or people's cars. Those are just some of the general cleaning things. We also ask that businesses adopt a basket if they're interested. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Adopt a Basket program at sanitation, but if you have a litter basket on the corner in front of your store, the department is able to provide gloves and bags for businesses who are willing to empty the basket on the corner and just place the trash next to it so that sanitation can more easily come and collect that and it doesn't overflow. I think that makes it a lot cleaner looking for passersby and your customers as you're operating your business. So if anybody's interested in adopting a basket, that's our Adopt a Basket program. We also have a sponsor basket program if you wanted to get one of these nice silver bullet type cans for your corner. We have a way for you to do that we can partner with you on. If you have questions about these things, I can take questions at the end, or if you want to interrupt me, that's okay with me too.
No, everything will be at the end.
Okay. All right. So we also offer volunteer cleanups. If anybody's interested in getting involved in our cleanup services, if you're noticing that there's some conditions in the area that, are not being addressed by other businesses on the block, or, sanitation doesn't necessarily come and sweep, since that is the owner's responsibility. So we do loan tools to volunteer groups are interested in doing that, whether it be through the community board or a bid or a small business association. We're happy to get involved and work with you to keep the neighborhood clean. When it comes to collection, we recommend that everybody evaluate what you have in your waste stream so that you can procure the right services with a private carder, and think about what it looks like to reduce, reuse, and recycle in your business. So every business is required to hire a private carder. You'll get a sticker that looks like this orange square on the right, and you should always make sure the private carder is correctly filled out these things. It includes the company. There's a BIC number. BIC is the Business Integrity Commission. They regulate the private carders. It tells you what kind of recycling you're authorized for on the right in this section here. Then it says when your collection is for refuse, for metal, glass, and plastic collection, as well as cardboard and paper collection, or a single stream collection if you were putting your recyclables together. We also ask that businesses set out their garbage and recycling neatly in bags. For garbage, it's black bags. For recycling, it's clear bags. We want them closed, tied up, however you're sealing your bag, and only set out the garbage an hour before the business closes. Or if your business is 24 hours, you can set it out within 2 hours of the time your carder is coming to get it. Businesses are required to recycle. There seems to still be lots of confusion on this, despite it being the law for quite some time. So businesses are required to recycle the same things that residents are required to recycle: metal, glass, plastic, cartons, paper, and cardboard. And then for specific businesses, there are special cases where you're required to recycle other items based on the type of business you are. So if you're a landscaper, we want you to be recycling yard waste. If you're a certain kind of restaurant, you should be doing organics collection or composting. So I'll get into some of those special things later. And then the last thing about collection is that you're not supposed to use the corner litter baskets for collection. Everyone, like I said earlier, all businesses should be registered with a private carder and not be putting even the debris that you sweep up in front of your business, that should not be going in our corner baskets. Those are intended for litter only, and the business waste is intended for the private carder. In case you're not aware, sanitation does education and issues violations to the businesses, the ones who generate the waste, right? That's what we call it, generator here. And then BIC, the Business Integrity Commission, licenses and gives violations to the private carters who collect the waste from the businesses. So this is just kind of a straightforward overview of how the division of labor is broken up between us and the Business Integrity Commission. So we regulate the businesses and the Business Integrity Commission regulates the carters. There are some special cases, like I had mentioned before, things that are not recyclable or banned within the city. So foam is not recyclable in New York City. It's been banned since January 1st of 2019. So if you're a food service business, you should not be giving things out in foam containers. We recommend that everyone is using things that are recyclable in New York City: rigid plastics, cardboard, aluminum, and things like that. Plastic bags have been banned since March 1st of 2020 with minimal exceptions. And there is also the paper bag fee that goes along with that. So if you're distributing paper bags, you should be charging 5 cents. That 5 cents comes back to the city for us to purchase and distribute reusable bags to the public. So if anyone doesn't have one of the city's reusable bags yet, you can go to nyc.gov/zero-waste-pledge and take the pledge to recycle, and we'll send you a free reusable bag. We most recently have a restriction on straws. So plastic straws are now only available upon request since November of 2021. You are required in your business to have a sign up that tells residents that they have to ask for a straw. And there's more details about that on our website if you're interested in getting into the details of it. There are some other special cases if your business is throws away 10% of the garbage is textiles. So if you're a manufacturer or designer, for commercial landscapers, 10% of your waste is probably yard and plant waste. So that must be brought to a permitted composting facility. And then certain businesses are required to separate and recycle their organic waste to the food waste in restaurants and other businesses that are generating lots of food waste. We do have some take back and donation things that I wanted to share. I think people are familiar with the plastic bag return. So this is a state regulation that stores over a certain square footage that had previously been distributing plastic bags are required to take those bags back and recycle them. We all know about bottles and cans, the 5 cent deposit, and how those need to be received back. There's also the Donate NYC Exchange and the Donate NYC Food Portal. Those are two donations programs that Department of Sanitation has been working on to get at the reusing part of reduce, reuse, recycle. So we want you to reduce your waste. We want you to recycle the things that you can't reduce, but there's also this option for reusing. So we have set up a website where any business for free can register and exchange things with other businesses or nonprofits that are in need of things. So it's kind of like another version of Craigslist, if you've ever used that, where you post something, it's visible to the other members of the exchange, and you can get tax benefits from the donations that you make. There's also the Donate NYC food portal. So if you're a restaurant that, or a grocery store, any sort of food business that has excess food, you can connect with a local nonprofit that is distributing food. We've made some great connections. You know, there's a bagel store on the corner that has extra bagels at the end of every day. And there's a church around the corner that is giving away food at the right time every day, that the bagel store can connect to the church and they can make sure that those food items aren't thrown away, aren't even composted. We want to get food to people in need before we want to see it go to waste. So those are a couple of take back and donation things. I'm not sure if people are aware, but the commercial waste zones is something else that the department's been working on for many years. There was local law 19 back in 2019 that divided New York City into 20 different commercial waste zones. And private carters are going to have to bid to provide service in each specific zone. We'll have up to 3 carters in each zone, and they're going to provide high quality, low cost service. The idea is that there's an unnecessary truck traffic and crisscrossing of routes that the private carters are currently doing the way that it's set up now. So if you want to hear more about that, you can visit our website. There is information on that online. We are expecting to continue receiving proposals from private carters this year, and I think this is intended to go live the end of this year or beginning of next year. So that's commercial waste zones. And then the department provides a whole bunch of free resources for businesses who are, you know, looking to do the right thing here. We have a website that you can visit, nyc.gov/DSNY business resources. And there are guidebooks, official notices, signage samples, all different things online that you can just download and print out, or you can order for us to mail to you. And then the commercial programs team at sanitation has their own website in case you have more detailed questions that I can't answer tonight. And there's also, for general questions, our customer service email and the phone number to my Bureau of Community Affairs. Yeah, so that was all for my presentation. I will stop sharing my screen and take questions at this point.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. That was very interesting. Maybe we can, if you can send that to us, we can include that in the small business and the sanitation part of our website. So one question I have, is it the business or the building that is responsible for the cleanliness?
So the way that it has been done is that the business there is the responsible party. If the business was abandoned or not operational or something, then the building would be responsible. So if there's a business there, we would issue violations to the business. If the business was closed, we would issue any violations to the building.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from the public?
I have a question from Dean Evans. Dean, confirm unmuting.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, great. Thank you. First, I want to say thank you to Community Board 8 for all the support that they've helped us in the past. I want to say that there is a difference between a business and a nonprofit, but there's also a difference between a nonprofit who charges every individual who enters their door, whether it's a gym membership, whether it's a school, or whether it's an event, than a nonprofit who basically welcomes the public into their doors without charging them. And I would like the community board to consider those nonprofits who do charge a fee or some form of compensation for anyone entering their doors, that perhaps they should actually be viewed as a business and be required to do what a business is required to, than say a church who is giving something to everyone for free, instead of someone who is charging everyone who's entering their door for a fee.
Interesting.
Well,
Thank you.
that's an interesting distinction. Is there something in particular that you're referring to? I don't think the board has the authority to make a decision about whether something is a not-for-profit within the tax laws or any other laws, but I don't know if there's a specific business and if there's something that the community board could help with respect to their compliance or failure to comply with particular sanitation rules, for instance.
It's interesting because, I mean, again, several of you will know my face. I live on 92nd Street, right across the street from the 92nd Street Y. And we're constantly dealing with their method of disposal of their waste. And it seems that the Y's continual responses, so many people enter our door, so we produce so much trash. But I have to say that the majority of the people who enter the doors of the 92nd Street Y are either paying how much, $35,000, $55,000 a year for preschool or kindergarten. They're paying a gym membership. They're buying a ticket for an event. So the Y tends to be a little bit abusive to our neighborhood in how they handle things. And if they were viewed as a business, I think it would be an easier way to rectify the problem. While the current problems we're dealing with the Y through Julie Menon have been able to be reduced dramatically, the Y is still doing things. So I'm sure I'm not the only individual in New York who lives across the street from a nonprofit who takes advantage of that. So, I mean, I'm really finding it so helpful of what you guys have been able to help us with. I mean, I have a small building that on 92nd Street. My property taxes are now over $80,000 a year, while the Y pays no property taxes, no income taxes to the city of New York, but uses their services and charges everyone a fee to enter their door.
Well, that I understand your frustration, but that's not something that we have any ability to work on. But with respect to individual issues, and when I walked by the Y on 92nd Street last week or the week before, I did notice a lot of piles of black trash bags in the daytime. But that's something that I could talk to Kaz about.
Right.
Who's, as I mentioned, the chair.
I do want to say that through Julie Menon and her staff, the Y has started keeping their trash inside, so those trash bags have dissipated. So I mean, I do commend the Y for that, but it's more so sometimes when you're a nonprofit, you tend to take advantage of privileges that you have. And I have to say, I'm a gay individual. I grew up being bullied by the so-called individual who was the privileged individual. And I tend to feel that the Y is a privileged individual who's bullying this neighborhood because they can hide behind the veil of nonprofit. And that's kind of my biggest complaint.
I think that's an interesting concept. It's not really for tonight's discussion, but I think it's a valid point, which applies not only to 92nd Street Y. I mean, every hospital on the Upper East Side is a not-for-profit. So it's a larger question, and maybe for a different analysis. But it is a valid point.
And
Yeah.
we do see your frustration, and thank you for continuing to come to the meetings and discuss these issues.
We have a raised hand from Verizon Wireless, so I'm going to ask you to confirm unmuting and also to identify yourself for the record.
It's Elaine Walsh. Normally you are able to translate me from wireless to Elaine. Let me say that nonprofits are corporations. They follow the same rules and regulations as all other businesses, and they should be fined, et cetera, et cetera. They get pickup from sanitation. They don't pay commercial. So I thank you for that input. And I just want to say that they are liable and should be ticketed. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle?
Sure, thank you. How many times a week do private stores get pickups, sanitation? Does Joan have the answer? Yeah.
So it would depend on what you've arranged with your private carder. If sanitation provides 2 or 3 times a week pickup to residences, but your private carder would be the one to tell you how frequently you're getting serviced.
Well, what happens if a business does not provide for itself an adequate amount of pickups per week? What happens if the business really needs 3 or 4 pickups? And I understand there's probably a difference between a wet pickup, wet garbage and dry. But what happens if the business itself underevaluates its needs? Does the sanitation department advise them in any way or help them to come to a decision about what's appropriate for their business?
So we definitely have resources available to businesses. There's a team of outreach folks at the Department of Sanitation who can help to answer questions on what is needed. As long as the business is only putting out the garbage when they are supposed to be, then we wouldn't necessarily know from conditions on the street. So if you only got pickup service for garbage and recycling once a week, say, and this is just completely hypothetical, if you're paying for once a week service and I only see your garbage out once a week, 2 hours or 1 hour before your collection time, then I would not know that you don't have enough service from sanitation perspective of us driving by. So we wouldn't be able to help them unless they came to us directly. In a scenario where they're putting the stuff out at the curb and it's sitting at the curb for extended periods of time because they don't have enough frequent service, then they would be issued violations for having material at the curb outside of when they're supposed to. And that would be an indicator to us that maybe they need more service. But my enforcement personnel who goes out to issue the tickets are not necessarily going to educate everyone on how frequent their service needs to be. They're just going to issue the violation that you cannot be leaving your garbage on the curb outside.
I was going to ask you about your enforcement. How large of an enforcement squad do you have?
It is a limited squad considering we have a large population to serve. I want to say our sanitation enforcement agents, there's under 75 of them for the entire city.
So very difficult to keep track, isn't it?
Keep up. I mean, we keep track of what we do, but we definitely.
Can you share an email with us or to whom complaints should go? Since I'm sure if you have that limited amount of inspectors, you wouldn't be adverse to if a civilian sees a breach to have it reported to you. But rather than just, I know 311 would be the go-to place. However, by the time that gets to you, chances are that violation is no longer even visible or long since passed. So do you have anything more immediate that you can share with us?
Yep. My customer service unit is available for taking these kind of complaints if you feel like it needs an immediate turnaround. Their number is 212-291-1220. I can put it in the chat as well. And
are those the same people that will answer questions that you mentioned? There's a team who will answer questions.
they can. My customer service unit has a very general knowledge, but we also have a unit specifically designed to do interactions with businesses, and they'd be able to connect you with the right person in that unit if they weren't able to answer your questions. So the customer service unit, can answer high level questions, but then my commercial waste team or the department's commercial waste team would be able to get into nitty gritty details of, how to choose how much Carter service you need and all of the other regulations.
But as far as the commercial pickup, is it required that the pickup service notify you of that? Maybe they could tell you how many times or what restaurant or what business, the number of times in a week that they have scheduled pickup. You could keep that on a database.
So it is on the sticker that the business is required to put in the window. So that is why when I was going through the presentation, that orange square sticker that every business is required to have from the private Carter tells me when you're getting service. And that's what the enforcement agents use to determine whether or not your garbage is out or recycling is out at the right time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I guess John will explain some things now.
Yeah, I mean, I could start at the beginning of that. We obviously have a lot of garbage pickup. So let's start with the major problem, right? So if garbage is on the street a couple hours before pickup, that should never be, in other words. It should be kept inside the business or the facility until the garbage pickup does arrive. Sometimes it's not practical to do it 2 or 3 hours before pickup. Every so often, to speak to Joan's point, I'll get a ticket for being 4 hours before my pickup time because my garbage is accumulated so much. And I do see their inspectors. I'm actually quite friendly with them. I always stop them in the street. I speak to them, they speak to me. So there is communication for business owners who really care about the community and their business. I'll also say it's very, very expensive. We have pickup 4 days a week, and we may be adding another pickup day. It is listed outside of the restaurant on the orange ticket or the orange square, which has to be visible or accessible to the general public. So if you see garbage that's sitting out there and it shows only 1 day a week, maybe they're just trying to cheapskate that a little bit. But we spend a month, almost $6,000 a month for garbage pickup. It's all private. None of it comes from the city. And then you have to maintain the garbage cans as well. Now, I don't know if you guys realize, but a garbage can costs about $600, $300 to $600, depending upon the quality. And so the volume of the garbage can is directly related to the volume of space in the basement or the storage facility before the garbage goes out. A lot of restaurants build a walk-in refrigerator to house their garbage before it makes it to the street because the accumulation is so rapid and it's cost prohibitive. The other thing I would say is that most restaurants that I see do a fairly, on the east side, the Upper West Side is actually a mess. I once was aiding a restaurant on the Upper West Side, and it seems they have completely different garbage pickup laws. And oftentimes bags are left directly on the sidewalk. On the Upper East Side, at least, and I don't know if this is citywide, it must be in a can. So yeah, I mean, I think the Department of Sanitation does a fairly good job with keeping up with it, even though they only have 75 representatives. But the business does have to document and make public all of their garbage pickups. I hope that answered most of the questions. If you have any specifics, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Thanks, John.
Welcome.
I had a question before we go to Valerie. Joan, could you just explain the snow removal rules? Because I know it's probably too late this year, but December will come up, and I think there's a lot of confusion about when places have to clear the snow off the sidewalk. Thank you, Valerie.
So there's a really great PDF on our website that I'm going to put a link to. And it goes over the FAQs of everything and who's responsible for what and when. Basically, you are required to, you're responsible for clearing snow and ice from the sidewalk. You can't push it back into the street or a crosswalk. We want a clear 4-foot path, and corner properties are supposed to be clearing a path to the sidewalk, path to the crosswalk rather, including the pedestrian ramps. So there are, you know what, I thought this had the times in there. It's like a certain number of hours after the snow stops falling that we're allowed to ticket. So I'm going to see if it's on this website somewhere. Okay, here it is. So if the snowfall ends between 7 a.m. and 4:59 p.m., we say you need to clear it within 4 hours. If the snowfall ends between 5 p.m. and 9 p.m., you have 14 hours. We're assuming you're not necessarily going to get to it that night and you just do it in the morning. And then if the snowfall ends between 9 p.m. and 7 a.m., the sidewalk's expected to be cleared by 11 a.m. I'm going to put a link to where that is too. Does that answer your question, Alita?
Yes, it does. Thank you. And Valerie, as co-chair?
Yeah, I just wanted to know, Joan, I mean, related to the snow, like in terms of the complaints that sanitation gets, like what are your top 3 or 4 complaints that you hear about? I mean, I would think snow removal would be a big one. And I guess I'm curious why you mentioned earlier that you issue the violations to the business. Why isn't the building owner partially responsible for that?
That's a really good question. And I'll have to look into that and get back to you because I'm not sure historically why that was the decision, that it's the business and not the building owner. It may be the case that some of the violations are to one and some of the violations are to the other. And I don't think I know the exact breakdown. So I'll get some more details on that. As for top complaints, snow is definitely up there. We get complaints, you know, from the public about missed collections and, you know, in the wintertime when snow operations are happening, it takes us a long time to catch up on the garbage and the recycling pickup. So we get a lot of complaints about that. That's probably one of the most popular ones.
Yeah. I also think that, you know, we've heard this before, when the sanitation department focuses on snow removal, picking up of garbage goes by the wayside, literally. And so we gear up for these huge snowstorms that never happen. And then the garbage piles up for 3 or 4 days. And, you know, instead of having snow piling up, we've got garbage everywhere. And I would just think that there would be some sort of better coordination by now with respect to, you know, switching it up and getting, you know, the plows. I mean, I don't understand the whole mechanics of it, but it just seems like it's very cumbersome and there hasn't been any technological improvements on how to better coordinate, given that the weather report is only right like 20% of the time.
So I think I learned a lot this year. I've been at sanitation for over 7 years now, but my first 7 years were in recycling and sustainability. And I've only been in community affairs for the last 3 months. This is my first winter being fully in the mix of what's happening with snow. And I learned so much about how much preparation and logistics goes into this, how many hours and how many guys it takes to put a plow on and off. And while we're still using the same plows we've been using for a very long time, those plows are able to go on any piece of equipment that we have. And that flexibility for them to be able to go on to anything makes us very nimble with when something goes down, we're able to get right back out there because we have the right equipment everybody is trained on just one piece of equipment that they need to get on and off. And it takes time, it takes manpower. There are lots of logistics and preparing, not just for the plows, but also the salting and the spreading and the filling spreaders and making sure that everybody's staged with their vehicles in the right places. You know, it's the same people. It's not like in a snowstorm, we get an extra couple thousand workers to help out. We're still using the same guys that are out there collecting the trash to do all of the logistical operations to get ready for the storm. And we cannot, we can't control the weather. We have multiple weather services that we're getting information from to try to prepare as best as we can. And we are using technology in that respect to figure out what's going to happen.
And then two hopefully quick questions. One of which is, one of the biggest business offenders of trash are big box, pharmacies, whatever, with these pallets and then plastic flying all over the sidewalk and everything. And I was just wondering how sensitized sanitation was to that. I mean, you guys have done a lot in terms of reducing the amount of plastic flying around by getting rid of the plastic bags. But I mean, on any given day, whenever you see a delivery at one of these stores, there's plastic flying everywhere, and you can catch it. And I'm just wondering whether the city was thinking about somehow, in terms of you regulating consumer plastic, regulating how these pallets are being delivered and what's, the garbage generated by that's flying all around.
That's not something that I've heard about yet. We're always open to new legislation. Maybe it's something you want to talk to your elected officials about, but at this point, I haven't heard anything about regulating that kind of plastic waste. If there's a specific store that you're seeing be an offender in this way, I would love for you to report that, whether you call my customer service team or you call 311 and give, do they have a typical time that they get these deliveries that you see it's every Wednesday at 9 a.m. or whatever it is? If you have some information like that, we'd be happy to go out and, issue violations if they're in existence for littering and obstruction of the sidewalk, like whatever it is that the problem is causing. The only thing that I would say, like you mentioned, they're big box stores. Our violations are just a slap on the wrist and a cost of doing business in a lot of scenarios. So while we want to keep the violations low in the scenario of small businesses who are struggling, they then are also, the same for every business. So what a small business can afford versus a big box store is another story.
And then lastly, in sort of in anticipation of our later discussion about open restaurants, open streets and the open restaurants program, how is sanitation preparing for the enactment? Hopefully, well, let's see what happens with the Article 78 proceeding. But I mean, what is sanitation's take on what they've seen thus far, and what new regulations or things are you thinking about? Because I mean, I know that there's somebody who has, one of the DOT people has said that the sheds won't be allowed to continue. However, one of the big problems that we talk about a lot is the space between the bottom of the shed and the actual street and or sidewalk. And I know this may sound like weird, but if this is going to continue, is the sanitation department going to be able to get some kind of vacuum cleaner apparatus that's going to be able to go between those crevices and clean it out? I mean, it causes laughing at me, but I mean, what is sanitation thinking about in terms of their response to this?
So we have been on an interagency planning panel. There's a couple of guys from my office. I am not one of the ones who's been on that panel, so I don't know the intricate details, but we are certainly concerned about our ability to clean the streets with the sheds there. I've been on walkthroughs where the sheds are causing lots of problems. And I've been to restaurants where I thought it was very clean and wonderful. So I think the interagency effort is taking sanitation's abilities and opinions into account as we move forward with the planning. And we will, do our best to keep the streets clean, regardless of what the regulations end up being.
John,
I
so
think this is a really good segue into the open restaurants because
yeah, you just mentioned something that you're in collaboration with the other agencies concerning the open restaurants. To what extent are you in them formulating the rules?
So my understanding is that DSNY is giving recommendations to DOT with other agencies. I can find out more details about exactly what our role is and get back to you on that tomorrow.
Yes, because we're
I think that would be,
yeah.
we're very interested.
Yes, sorry, Lee.
I was just going to ask, so as far as you know, is DOT the lead agency in this? Because there have been some questions about whether it would be DOT or revert back to the Department of Consumer Affairs. Do you know? I mean, and I don't want to put you on the hot seat, but we don't know where things are lying.
Yeah, I will give you a definitive answer tomorrow.
But based on
that would be great.
But based on what we voted on the text amendment, DCA was going to be in charge of the sidewalk. DOT was going to be in charge of the street. So, I mean, that's what we were told. That's what we voted on. Are we being led up the proverbial garden path?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm just not intricately familiar with all of the details. So let me find out for sure so I don't give you any misinformation, and I will get back to you in the morning.
And one last point.
Thank you so much.
The DSNY truck drivers, do they come under the 3-minute idling rule?
Oh, that's another great question. I can find out for you.
Because I've seen during the winter, the trucks sit there for 7-8 hours waiting and they're idling, just sitting at an intersection waiting for the snow to fall. Okay.
Yeah, I'll find out what the rule is on that.
Yeah, sorry to put you in the hot seat.
No, that's what I'm here for. I wish I could answer every question, but I'm still learning some of these details in my new position, and I will always get back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joan. And I think it was really helpful that you're here. For Michelle and Dean, if we'd like to move to the open restaurants part of this meeting, if you could hold off on your questions for a few minutes. I'd like to start first with a brief summary of what my reading and based on conversations with the named plaintiff in the Article 78 proceeding, who's spoken to other people. There is some confusion. There was within the last couple of weeks, and then followed by the committee chairs that I mentioned earlier, giving a brief summary of what the rules are with respect to the open restaurant or the current sidewalk cafe rules. There was a couple of weeks ago the granting of the Article 78 proceeding by a state Supreme Court judge. We don't know yet if the city is appealing it. The way it looks, it's the zoning text amendment has been nullified according to the judge because the city did not prepare an EIS. And it needs to. The judge referred to the noise complaints, for instance, as a clear indicator that the open restaurants program impacts the environment and therefore it needs an EIS. It calls out the DOT, but without going into that. It looks like there needs to be some analysis of some rules, whether they're the current rules that have led to these noise complaints or other rules in the future that are yet to be written is unclear. But according to this judge, it looks like there is no zoning text amendment that's in effect, and there can't be an EIS until there are some rules to be analyzed. So that's where we stand. And then there seems to just be a lot of confusion moving forward about whether the city starts from scratch, whether it has to come back to all of the community boards with another zoning text amendment, when the rules have to be written, who's writing the rules. Court referred to the DOT, not clear if they're the lead agency, as Joe just pointed out. So having said that, there is no longer an applicable, at least unless there's an appeal in which the city prevails, no longer an applicable zoning text amendment, and we don't know what the rules are. So having said all of that, Kaz, if you'd like to, we'll go from sanitation to street life to zoning and development, followed by transportation on the rules that currently apply to the sidewalk cafes, or any new rules. I know Saida posted on the website the Intro 31, which is the bill for the rules that is before the city council right now. So Kaz, if you want to go ahead, that'd be great. Thank you.
Well, with sanitation, we've just heard everything. With street life, as what we voted on the text amendment, which has now been nullified, the DCA has strict control of the sidewalk, and it's no new enclosed restaurants. Yet you walk down the avenues, you go anywhere, and there are thousands and thousands fully enclosed restaurants, fully built, they're second homes, they're completely enclosed, which is, and there should be the 8-foot clearance. And currently on some of the sidewalk, there is no 8-foot clearance. So DCA has been sidelined by the DOT for the past several years, two and a half years, and DOT has done very little. So if there's no text amendment, what happens to all the sidewalk structures? I don't know. Do we go back to where we were, or is it status quo and it's a free-for-all? That's something that we need to find out.
And a question for Joan from sanitation, if you don't mind, Kaz. Is there a difference between trash pileup and rodent and roach and other vermin infestations with the sheds, whether they're completely sealed up or open, and just tables and chairs on the sidewalk, have you noticed?
So from my experience, and this is not statistical citywide, I feel like the sheds, when there is a floor that was mentioned before by one of the residents, is more of a problem. So you're not able to clean the street 18 inches off from the curb the way that you're required to by law if there's a floor blocking the street. We do not have a vacuum that's going under there, as much as that would be an ideal situation. It also needs to be washed down. So definitely I have seen rat burrows next to sheds that have floors. I've seen other establishments where they're doing a great job cleaning and it's not causing that. So I think it depends on the establishment and their dedications in keeping it clean to some extent.
And for part of the work that you're doing with the DOT and other agencies, does that include rules relating to cleaning and maintenance and type of floor if they do have outdoor structures? Because even if Intro 31 provides that there are no outdoor structures, if they still just have tables and chairs, will they be on platforms in the roadway? And we're just not sure. So is that something that you're working on?
I think that's all being discussed at this point.
Okay, thank you. Kaz, with respect to the street life portion of this, the community boards have how many days right now to review sidewalk cafe applications? And do you know if they will have any opportunity to review roadway applications? And what happens with applications in the summer? Because not all community boards meet in July and none meet in August. So what happens if there's an application in July for a sidewalk cafe?
Well, what's been going on in the past, that DCA has rule over the sidewalk. They have no control of the street. That's strictly DOT. As far as the community board gets notified from the DCA when someone applies for a unenclosed or enclosed sidewalk cafe on the sidewalk, and I think we have about, I'm not quite sure, so many days in which to respond. I think it's about 60 days, maybe even less or more. John could clarify that. And as far as the over the summer, then if there's no full board meeting, then it would go to DCA as a committee recommendation, like many other things. But normally, what has been found is that the DCA and the SLA will not hold back any licenses for, any reason at all. They will just grant them.
Because a number of community boards and public comments have been to extend the time for review to 45 days for community boards to look at licenses.
Well, but as over the summer, most boards don't meet, and with the SLA we have a bit more leeway. But with the DCA, we're on a clock, so that's the downside of that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, Elizabeth and Anthony, would you like to do something on behalf of the Zoning and Development Committee with respect to restaurants or the zoning?
Yeah. Said, if I could share my screen.
You should be able to do that now, Anthony.
Okay, let's see what happens. That'll do. Is that right? Yeah, that's what I want. Okay. No, that's what I want. Okay. This will be really quick. And I have a cold, so if I start coughing, I'm not dying, I just have a cold. Basically, the existing zoning, and this is sort of the information in the center, the key dates are January 1980, and this, most of you know this, most of us know this, but it's useful for those who do not. Sidewalk cafe regulations were adopted into the zoning resolution in January of 1980. In June of 2020, and those regulations called for, and those are the regulations which are still in effect, 3 different types of sidewalk cafes: an enclosed sidewalk cafe like the Green Kitchen down here on the lower left, which is a fully enclosed structure that is fully enclosed, basically permanent structure. There are unenclosed sidewalk cafes, which are large sidewalk cafes, which have must maintain certain clearances that we'll talk about in a minute. And then finally, there are small sidewalk cafes on the lower right there, which are basically 1 table deep. The sidewalk cafe regulations established certain zones and zoning designations that allowed for sidewalk cafes, and specifically prohibited certain areas. In our district, they were prohibited on across big cross streets, 72nd, 79th, and 86th Street. Under the Executive Emergency Order 126, Mayor de Blasio in June of 2020 established the Temporary Open Restaurants Program. Excuse me. In October of 2020, the City Council passed the Permanent Open Restaurant Law, which basically asked for the zoning resolution to be amended, or insisted that the zoning resolution be amended to eliminate all of zoning resolution 14 dash whatever, the entire section relating to open restaurants. The point being to take Department of City Planning out of the sidewalk cafe business altogether. And why this is not progressing, I don't know. Oh, I know why. Sorry. And the basic summary of the rules are shown here. It's 8 feet kind of minimum clear path, which is honored frequently in the breach. 12 feet minimum clear path at a bus stop. There are also rules related to signs and fire hydrants and trees that have some kind of raised tree bed. And those are the existing regulations. And the idea was to replace those zoning regulations with nothing. Just take it all away. And the only proviso within that was that the zoning resolution, the change to the zoning resolution that passed in February and was effectively, at least temporarily nullified. The only hesitation on that was that the resolution would not, the amendment would not go into effect until new rules were in place for these, whether it's new sidewalk cafes or new roadway cafes. And the point of all of it is that by removing the zoning resolution, taking city planning out of the sidewalk cafe business, sidewalk cafes would now be allowed anywhere, any district, any place in the city, any street, no matter how wide or how narrow, literally just a function of if the sidewalk is wide enough. And then there were rules about adjacencies and how many there could be. And then this is a kind of relatively clear idea of what the proposed new regulations would be. One of the things that's come up is that it's not clear that the city council has entrusted DOT for enforcement, even of the roadway cafes. There have been alternate versions of regulations, some of which, such as this one, limit the height of the roadway cafe to 3 feet, with no permanent roof, no permanent structure. In fact, sort of presupposing a kind of temporary use, no floor. And then there are others that have said, other versions of the proposed regulations that suggest the exact opposite, what we have now. And so anyway, this is a kind of basic idea of what might happen. It's as if we took the existing sidewalk cafe rules and just applied them throughout the city in a kind of sort of uniform way. But as yet, since there are no proposed regulations, or at least accepted regulations, I think we still have time to make our voices heard, especially really about the roadway dining. And I know that Elizabeth wanted to say something. And I think this was the end of my very brief, I hope, presentation.
Thanks, Anthony. Elizabeth?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention a couple of things which are related to the rules. We met about this, the small business and zoning met about it last April, a year ago, and I think we came to some very useful conclusions that are now moot, but we certainly did not take a happy view of the proposed permanent plan. And so I hope when we address the rules and address any changes, we won't make our proposals in a way that it looks as though we're supporting this. It's simply because to address a question, but not in support. And on the environmental impact statement, which is required, I think that those of us who've been working on zoning for years have a kind of, suspicious view of how they turned out. It depends upon what the client wants. And I think the client doesn't want trees in Central Park. The EIS wouldn't find any. So I hope that we will have a strong position, a strong involvement in looking into the EIS. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, what the court made clear was that without rules to look at, you can't analyze what the environmental impact would do. And you can't say that everything will be fine without knowing what it is that will be fine. So thank you, Elizabeth. Let's go to Chuck and Craig, and then I have a comment about something that doesn't seem to fit into any of this right now. So, but is still related to open restaurants. But go ahead, Chuck or Craig, please.
Hi, everyone. I don't know that I see Chuck on here, so I guess I will take this. So I'm speaking on behalf of the Transportation Committee, but I also just want to be careful. I don't want to provide background information because frankly, I don't think it would be appropriate for me to try to expound on the lengthy set of rules that are in place because it is a DOT administered program. I will say simply that when the program went into effect, that essentially the changes were that essentially DOT would enable restaurants to be able to take over parking spaces and sidewalk space as long as they maintain minimum requirements in terms of siting and not inhibit other uses that are prioritized from being able to be maintained, whether it be pedestrian clearance, fire hydrants, bus lanes, bike lanes, so on and so forth. And then everything really just stemmed from that. So I also just want to clarify that if you look at the resolution that we passed as a community board, there was no mention of the DCA in there. It was always based on DOT operating the program. And I believe, just so we can all be clear, it seems as if DCA is now the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection because the proposed bill does not contain any mention of DCA in there. And then finally, just want to clarify as well that in terms of the sidewalk cafes, and I know there are concerns about the structures that have been built as extensions, that the bill that as proposed right now explicitly states that it's only going to permit those that were in place before March 16th, 2020. So it's not going to just grandfather in any restaurant that perhaps built something or created an extension since then.
Thank you. There is, if I could say so, and correct me if I'm wrong, an argument at least that DCAWP should be involved because they granted licenses to sidewalk cafes and that DOT, a lot of people believe have evidence that the enforcement has been, let's just say, less than expectations. So I'm not sure. I know your transportation, and I guess the issue is who's in charge and what's happening and who has a seat at the table. Because right now, community boards and I believe city council members also do not have a seat at the rule writing table. So that was something that had been raised. Before we move into a general discussion, I just would like to mention, because there was a hearing last week, and I'm not sure what the time frame is, but the idea of allowing propane tanks and heaters to be used in outdoor restaurant spaces. There was a city council hearing in the committee of, I think, fire and emergency management. The fire department came. Two of the representatives from the fire department had 36 years of experience each for a combined 72 years of experience. They had photos of the failure of restaurants to comply with the very basic safety rules that the fire department reluctantly wrote because it was never happy with the idea of outdoor restaurants using propane heaters and tanks. The failure of a number of restaurants to comply with safety issues, such as storing propane tanks in the wooden divider in the roadbed, and cars have hit those barricades. It had a video of a truck carrying, I think, a few hundreds of propane tanks that fell over on the LIE on ice and had a plume of flame going up, I don't know, maybe 100 or so feet, plus hurtling balls of fire that were propane tanks individually exploding. So I guess I shouldn't express my point of view here, but there is an issue of the safety and the use of propane tanks. The restaurants naturally want to be able to heat outdoors when it's cold and bring in their customers, but there are alternatives, which the fire department pointed out. And basically what it said is that there is no safe way to have propane tanks. So this is not really my interpretation, but it feels like it's something that the fire department has expressed. So I just wanted to throw it out there because I don't know when they're going to vote. I don't have any information about that, and I don't know any kind of time frame. So with that, if we could just open it up to discussion. Do any of the chairs want to add anything else before we move to Michelle, and then I guess Anthony, you're a chair. Go ahead.
Yeah.
If we could unmute Anthony. Thanks, Michelle. Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
Rita, while we're waiting, it was stated from DSNY that there's a group of agencies involved in the rulemaking. Since we are an agency, well, I think we should pass a resolution tonight that we should be involved in decision making also.
It's a good resolution. I have to say, I think Michelle has seconded it, that Russell has asked that there be no resolutions, but you've made it and Michelle seconded it.
But at the same time, I'm sure the Hospitality Alliance has a say into DOT and the City Council of what should be written. So I think it behooves us to maybe not a full resolution, but I think we should be involved to some extent.
Well, there was a second, so do you want to speak to it and craft a sample resolution?
Well, the only thing I would say is that I move that, or the resolution should be that we should have a say in any decision making that will take place if and when the permanent open structure takes effect.
Okay, Michelle has her hand raised. Let's see if there are any comments from the public. Let's just stick to this particular resolution. Wait, I know that, Michelle, thank you. If we could just stick to this topic of having a seat at the table for the rule writing so we can keep a somewhat organized structure for this meeting. So Michelle, does your comment have to relate to that? There is someone, okay, he's lowered his hand from the public. So Michelle, does your comment relate?
Yes, it does.
Go ahead.
I had other comments to make, but with respect to the resolution, another alternative is to write a letter. Either way, this community board should make a very, very strong statement that we want to be at the table. And now there is nothing stopping us from being at the table. Whether or not we write a letter and they say no, it doesn't stop us from being at the table, because we have every right to submit rules that we think should be incorporated, which is not an affirmation of the program, but that if it's implemented, these should be incorporated. And I just wanted to make a couple of points because I think there's some additional information, if I may. The DOT, when I did a little further research into this, is now the temporary lead agency. My understand is if and when this becomes permanent, it's going to be the DCAWP. The other thing is, my understanding is that there were to be no sidewalk structures and that there were to be no pallets, so that any of the furniture is actually standing on the street or in the roadbed. And that should eliminate some of the sanitation. And if we ask for rules, that should be one of them. One of the questions I had for sanitation is, in these rules, the sidewalk cafe is permitted to be the width of the restaurant. So if the garbage is supposed to be put out in front of the restaurant, whether it be at the building line or at the curb line, wherever it be, if there's a cafe there, how is that rule even possible for it to be, observed? The other question is, since this zoning resolution, the change
Michelle, can you hold off on those comments and we'll come back to them when we're talking about other aspects, so we could look at the resolution that Cause raised, all right, so that we could...
I raised the question of the letter,
Right,
And
you
maybe
did.
I'd like to know how Kaz feels about it. I'm willing to support the effort either way, but we should not be, one of my concerns about a resolution is if it goes to the full board and the resolution is voted down, that has now taken away the committees and the community board to offer our rules as a community board. If we write a letter, it leaves it open because there's no way they can say, no, you can't, because any one of us in any position on this board can write rules that we are suggesting. So I'm only talking about this now as a strategy point of view. If you want to specifically stick, to this whole rules writing thing, I support that in every possible way, but I would like to present it in a way which will ensure our success in participation. So I'd like to hear how Kaz feels about that or what others feel about it before we take a vote. And then
Okay,
later on,
before
I
we-
hope you'll call on me because I have other things to say.
Absolutely, Michelle. Thank you for your patience. Kaz, if you could just repeat the language that you proposed, because I received a chat that some people who are attending do not know what you specifically have said about a resolution language.
Well, I've just thought of it. I haven't written it down, but the resolution, and I agree with Michelle, maybe we should do both the letter and the resolution. That way, we know that something will get done. But basically, that any community board should have a say in any new rulemaking, as the DSNY and other city agencies have a seat. We should have a seat if and when the open restaurant becomes permanent. We need to say if and when, because, if it doesn't become, then there's nowhere to go. But if it does become permanent, we should have a say in any rulemaking.
Okay, so the lawyer in me is asking you, do you mean a seat at the table for the rule writing before the program becomes permanent?
Oh,
because
definitely.
I think that's what they're, okay.
Oh,
Because
definitely.
I wasn't clear from your language. Okay.
Oh, definitely. And before anything gets voted on and publicized, the community board should have a say. I'm sure the hospitality license is going to have a say in it.
They've already had quite a lot of says from what I understand, including on the appeal of the Article 78. Thank you. Okay, let's go to, are there any members of the public? No, okay, so let's go in order. Anthony? Thank you, Kaz. Go ahead, Anthony.
Okay, I just wanted to make this is a propane comment. Should I wait or?
Yeah, why don't you wait and let's do this first again, so we're in order. Thank you very much. Okay, Rebecca.
Hi, I'm trying to finagle this within Robert's rules. I think a letter is a different story, but I think a resolution's out of line, so I'm making a motion to table.
What do you mean a resolution's out of line?
I'll speak to it if there's a second.
Is there a second? You need to do, there are a lot of people with hands up, so if there's a second,
Billy
you
and
need
Lori.
to do something. Okay, so now, and when you say table it, do you mean table it in general or do something else with it?
I mean, I think that's my way of trying to subtly suggest that Michelle's idea of a letter was better if we're going to do anything. I don't think this is a resolution to request that is the appropriate way to get this to happen. Especially since, again, this has to go before a full board. I think a letter reiterating support, for community involvement is way more effective.
Okay, if and I don't know this, maybe Valerie is parliamentarian, you can weigh in. If we table it, the resolution, does that still allow us to write the letter? And do we need a vote on that?
The motion to table is not debatable.
Right, so we're not debating it, I'm just asking a procedural question.
Well, the motion's on the floor, right? Somebody second the motion. So.
And we need to vote on it.
I don't, unless somebody wants to withdraw their motion.
Well, I guess that's why I'm asking, if the motion is if the resolution is tabled, are we still able to write a letter, or does it table the entire
They're
conversation?
not related to one another. They're independent.
I'm
Okay.
only tabling a resolution, not a conversation or anything else.
Okay. Yeah,
I'm
not
willing to withdraw my resolution as long as something gets done that we have a say, whether it's a letter, whether it's pigeon carrier, or whether it's whatever it is, we need to be involved in the rulemaking. I don't care how it's done. I'll leave that up to the parliamentarians and the lawyers.
Okay, then Valerie, do we need to vote on the letter? And there should be still, I see a lot of hands up to discuss. Is everyone who has a hand up to discuss the idea of having a seat at the table? If not, could you lower your hand? Okay, so no one's lowered their hand except for someone from the public. So then let's go in order. Rebecca, did you have anything you wanted to add? Your hand still raised.
No, I'm sure I will after. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Elaine.
I'm a little confused and upset. I'm not sure what's on the table. I support that we have a resolution that the community boards be at the table. There are many other components that will have to be done tonight to a resolution to defeat what is happening with the open restaurants. If the board or the committee really wants a letter, you know I always stand for a letter, but I am very concerned about a proposal coming in now not to have a resolution and where it's coming from. Our co-chairs have been consistent with their concerns. We have been consistent with our being left out of any discussion on open restaurants. And thank God a judge has come in to begin to support a community, all of us, any of us. I don't live on Park Avenue where there are no restaurants. I live where there's a total violation of a street that's restricted having restaurants. So what I want to say is I'm fed up. You want to do a letter? I've always supported letters, but the fact that we would not now have a resolution for whatever was left out, I do not understand, because we need a few more resolutions tonight to make our community, meaning all of New York City, and my brother was a big restaurant owner who supports me on this, that residents come first. If we don't have residents, we don't have restaurants, we don't have businesses. So we need to look at our residential communities. Thank you.
Okay, there are a lot of different topics that were raised by committee chairs, that are raised by the court's opinion, that are raised in comments that were made at an 8-hour city council hearing, for instance. So there are a lot of issues. Let's try and deal with them one at a time so that we can have impact and don't have to wait until there's consensus on every single issue, is what I'm thinking. And if anyone disagrees, please say so, but at least there's the possibility, depending on the consensus of this group of board members, on a letter in favor of having a seat at the table. Craig, you're next.
Hi, I just want to express my concern here. I think there's a lot of confusion because of the fact that, yes, we don't know so much, but I think we're also at times we're talking in terms of speculation, and I think it's a dangerous approach for us to be reacting to things that we don't know for a fact may or may not be happening, speculating who may be administering the program or which rules may be in place. I think we need to just receive some more facts before we move forward with this. I think we clearly all agree we need DOT or whatever city officials can speak to it. But I think it's really hard for us to all of a sudden try to put together a comprehensive list of recommendations at this point when we don't even know what we're basing it on. I think we should really be able to parse through the proposed legislation as our baseline at this point, and then try to get a little more information, and then try to move forward with how we address the rulemaking process. But I'm not comfortable with all the speculation that's taking place here, and would prefer dealing with the actual knowns instead of fear of the unknowns.
Well, for what's on the table, though, there is no speculation. What's on the table, and we heard Joan from sanitation say that they are negotiating and the agencies are meeting, but they're meeting without the input of community boards. So right now, that's what's on the table only, is for community boards to have a seat at the rule writing table to implement any kind of open restaurant program.
Right. No, that, and I'm not talking specifically about
Okay.
our view regarding whether we should participate in the rulemaking. I don't think there's anyone here who would disagree that we should ideally have some input, but I'm just talking beyond that. So I'll come back later with more necessary.
But all the resolution
Thank
was
you.
we should have a say at the table, not anything that we're saying we want this, that, or something else. We're not saying that.
Can
So
we just clarify what is meant by at the table here? If anyone is familiar, I think it would be helpful for all of us. If anyone knows how the rulemaking process actually works, the only thing that I see here on the DOT website is that in the summer and fall of 2022, in the estimated timeframe, it says a robust community and borough level engagement and outreach program will be set up for sharing the design concepts in advance of the city's rulemaking process known as the City Administrative Procedure Act, or CAPA. It is through CAPA that the city will finalize and adopt formal rules related to permanent open restaurants program, including rules for outdoor dining structures in the roadway. So when I see that, it suggests that there actually is a process in place, and that I don't know what our involvement would be, but that's, I don't know anything about CAPA, but if anyone can explain it or is familiar with that, I think that would be helpful for everyone.
I don't know either. Kaz, do you want to address anything else since it's your language?
No, my only concern is we know that DOT has done nothing for the past 2 years as far as enforcement. We know that restaurants have spent thousands and thousands of dollars building these permanent structures that one day will have to come down with DOT's blessing. So, and as we know, DOT will come to us on the 11th hour and tell us, oh, this is what we think it's going into effect tomorrow. You know, we're not asking to be at the table to make the rules, but we want to be in the discussion when things come up on what is proposed and if we agree with it or if we don't agree with it. Because what's going to happen is DOT and the Hospitality License is going to make the rules. DOT is going to come to us and say, this is what we're planning, accept it or not. It's going, you'll have a year in which to look at it, and after that we will rediscuss it. And that's been their modus operandi. They'll come to us, they'll tell us that we have a year in which to look at it, and then we will discuss it, and it never happens.
Okay, thank you. Part of what came up at the very lengthy city council meeting is the idea that there is one set of rules that will apply to the entire city. That's something that people had a lot of comments about. Okay, so let's go on to, Craig, your hand is still up. So would you lower it and we'll get back to you, and were you adding something? Okay, thanks. Gail, and then Billy, and then Marco.
I want to echo what was just said by Kaz. I've worked with city and state government for over 50 years. Once draft rules are in place, if you go back for whatever those draft rules are, the likelihood of them being changed substantially is non-existent. It just does not happen. In this case, we don't have to, Craig, have a comprehensive list of recommendations yet. I think we all have different thoughts as to how the program could be better, could be properly administered. I have never considered myself naive, but I do not understand the concern about having a resolution and discussing this at the full board as the discussions are taking place, Community Board 6, Community Board 2, being able to say that what we want to do is be involved in the rulemaking. It may not be part of the actual coalition of city agencies, but we want our input to be heard. And I think sending a message that there are concerns, we're a community board. We are here to represent the people who live and work in this district, and there have been concerns raised. So if community boards are really shunted aside, it's really important that as the rulemaking discussions are taking place, whatever we decide that there are things that are like motherhood and apple pie. There are comments that almost everybody on the board probably would agree with, but why would anybody be opposed to having a solid resolution just saying that we want to proceed with being involved? We don't want the rules to suddenly come up, and Kaz is completely correct. The rules will be promulgated, they'll be draft, but you have 2 days to review them and they're going into effect. That happens, unfortunately, much more than we would hope. So it would be my desire just to see us be a little open and not as concerned. Letters can work sometimes, but in this case, why shouldn't it go in front of the entire board? Why should we not, as a group, think in terms of why we sit on the board and try to make sure that the voice of our community is heard? Thank you.
Well, right now, we don't have a resolution on the table. Cause withdrew the resolution in favor of the concept of a letter. Billy, I know you have to run, so go ahead.
Thanks, Alita. Hello, everybody. I'm going to try to be very brief because I have a call that started 2 minutes ago. Now, I'm not a city administrative lawyer, but I was pulling up the Administrative Procedure Act, and maybe relevant to us is the following. It says, each agency shall publish the full text of the proposed rule at least 30 days prior to the date set for a public hearing to be held. It also says that there's opportunity for consideration of agency and public comment, and that the agency shall provide the public an opportunity to comment on the proposed rule through several mechanisms, but one of the required mechanisms is at a public hearing. And then finally, there are provisions in the Administrative Procedure law for getting the rule sent directly to the chairs of the community board. So I may be wrong about all this, but it's my understanding that we will have a seat at the table in that sense. Whether there's another way to have a seat at the table, I think we haven't fully fleshed out what that looks like, because it's the idea that we would somehow have a hand in the initial writing or crafting of the rule, that there would be a pre-hearing hearing that gets held. I think we need to be a little bit more specific about what it is that we're looking for. And then lastly, the reason I support the motion to table, although I won't be able to vote on it, is I think Russell, it's my understanding that Russell did not want us passing any resolutions tonight. And part of his argument, I'm curious what you all think, is that this properly belongs before the full transportation committee. Maybe that's mistaken. But I guess my view of this is, if we want to send a letter, that's fine. But I don't think we're going to accomplish much with a resolution calling for more of a seat at the table if we aren't very specific about what that looks like, other than what's already established in the city charter. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Cause, if you want to, while anyone else is speaking, think about more specifics for a letter, assuming that everyone votes in favor of it, maybe you want to do that. Thank you. Marco.
Thank you. Following the Robert rules, I would like to call the questions. The first, the question that was made by Rebecca. That is we had to dispose that resolution. Once we we resolve, then we can continue talking in another direction. But I would like to call the question for the Rebecca's resolution. That's what it is. That's the Robert rule.
Okay, but there's no resolution right now.
No,
because
Rebecca
Cos
calls
withdrew
for.
it.
No, Rebecca calls for table, and I would like to call that, and then we see what
But
what
but
the
there is
majority
no
will
more
determine. The majority will determine
no-
that we can
Right,
go in that
but there-
direction or not.
But there's no resolution on the table right now because Cos withdrew it, so there's nothing to table. Am I wrong?
Well,
I mean, I'm no expert in Robert's rules, but there is
I
no
think that's right.
resolution in favor.
I think that's right. If somebody wants to make a motion for a resolution, they can make a motion for a resolution now. And then, does anybody want to make a resolution motion? Michelle's saying no. There are more people who want to speak before.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was-
okay. Go ahead.
Nobody
Deb.
called on me, but I was just unmuted. So did that mean I was called on? I was
Are
just
you-
gonna, somebody unmuted me. I was just gonna say, the motion to table was on a resolution and the resolution was withdrawn.
Right.
So the motion to table is non-existent. The resolution is non-existent. And I have to say, if we're having this much discussion about a simple, benign resolution like that, asking for participation or to be heard, I'm flabbergasted. But if that's the case, let's do a letter, because frankly, there are a million things to discuss about this. Whether or not you have resolutions tonight, there's a million things to talk about here. And if we're getting bogged down on something as mundane as that we can't agree to want to be participants, that to me is over the top. So you have stymied me. But there's no point calling a question because there's nothing to call a question on. Alita, I just want to make a procedural point that I was hoping you would have said. When they talk about this making rules and the EIS, I just wanted to clarify for everybody that the EIS is going to be done on the rules that they propose. So I wanted everybody to understand that. And because there is no EIS unless they give them a set of rules to do the EIS on, we absolutely in advance should come up with some rules. And you know what? If this community board can't do it, others will.
Well, hang on, Michelle. Let's deal with the idea of a letter asking for a seat at the table. You're right. The city has to have some rules, whether it's the rules that currently exist that they'll look at to determine whether those rules should be in place for an EIS or for the program moving forward, or new rules, and then base an EIS on that. There has to be something, according to the judge's opinion, that they have to look at. Now, they have until the end of April to decide whether to appeal, and we don't know whether they will. I know Andrew Riggi spoke about the need to appeal this decision and how hard the Hospitality Alliance is working with the city council and the city administration to do this. So I'd like to call on a member of the public, Boaz Galil, but I would ask everyone who has their hand raised who's already spoken, and Shari, you have not, if there's anything else that they'd like to add, and Elizabeth Ashby hasn't either, to the idea of writing a letter in support of having a seat at the table. As I just want to have everyone to remember that CAUS had first raised a resolution there, and there was a motion to table it. So in order to be able to do this, and for Billy's comment on the Department of Transportation and the Transportation Committee, this is a meeting with a lot of committee involved. There are a lot of issues. There will be plenty of opportunity to weigh in on the issues as they come up, in the same way, but maybe even longer, that the ULURP comments on the blood center took a couple of meetings. There are a number of issues on various topics for the open restaurant program. So I see two members of the public. If there okay, so let's go to them first. Boaz and then Dylan Geronimo Kennedy, if I'm reading that correctly.
Really quick. My only ask is that I assume that you guys are going to write a letter. Just put in the letter that not only to bring the community board date to the table, but also bring Upper East Side business owners, restaurant owners, coffee shop owners to the table as well. I know that you guys, I live in Upper East Side, and I know that I don't like all the structure on the sidewalks, but keep in mind, the owners are just now starting to recover. I mean, the tourists are not back yet. And the winter is, I mean, still cold outside. So yeah, let's try to bring the business owner to the table as well. So they will have, so their voice will be heard as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dylan?
Hey, thank you very much. And by the way, Alita, you pronounced my name perfectly. I appreciate that. I just wanted to say that, you know, regardless of what form it takes, letter or not, I really encourage and appreciate the support that this community board is putting into improving outdoor dining and making it not just safer, but cleaner and nicer. I will say, just as someone who enjoys eating out in the neighborhood, and I live in this neighborhood, and I love being able to cross the street and eat outside. I definitely want outdoor dining to be nicer, and I think that's something that, as it becomes more permanent, has to happen. But I think at times there's also been a push to just have less of it, and I just wanted to share my perspective as someone in the neighborhood who really enjoyed outdoor dining, that I definitely want it improved. I definitely want parts of it fixed, but I don't think that fixed just means less of it. And if I had to choose to go back to what it was like 2 years ago versus how it is now, I'd probably prefer how it is now, though I definitely think it can be improved. And I very much support all of your efforts to improve it. Just wanted to share that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's just go to two members of the board who have not spoken yet, which would be Shari Wiener and Elizabeth Ashby. Shari, go ahead.
We live in a neighborhood that's greatly impacted by outdoor eating facilities. I think a resolution is much stronger than a letter. I disagree. I understand Russell said not to, but he doesn't control what we do. And I would like to make a motion to pass a resolution. Well, it'll have to be worded different than the one that Rebecca tabled, but I think we owe it to the residents in our neighborhood to pass a resolution which is much stronger than a letter. So I make a motion to write a resolution asking for participation of community boards when the rules are being written, not after they're done, and then they have the public hearing and it's a done deal already. We have to be at the table, as people are saying, when the rules are done. So that is my motion. Will somebody make a second for to have a resolution? Okay, we have that. So, Alita.
Okay, I see several people have their hands.
Are they a second? Because I'd like to call the question.
Oh, there's several people second, and then you can call the question, but I think we need to do a resolution. It's much stronger than a letter.
Okay, Valerie, you want to call the question? Is there anyone who seconds calling the question? I see Rebecca does. Okay, then let's go to a vote. So you know what? I need to write down who's here, and then there are no secretaries here, so we'll just go through. And if you could all lower your hands, or Saida, if you could all lower everyone's hands.
1 second. I think Rebecca had a different reason for raising her hand. So Rebecca, confirm.
Okay, Rebecca, did you want to say something different?
I mean, I was trying to obey Robert's rules by not explaining exactly why I thought a letter was better earlier, but I think it's worth it to say this. The original resolution on the table was expressing our need to have community input. And if a resolution would have come out, I think, of this committee in that way, it would not be unanimous at the full board. And that would be horrible. I also think time is of the essence. I think I stand by my initial belief that a letter right now is stronger and that this should be added maybe under new business, or a resolution should be made at the full board so we avoid the votes from people. Like, this should, community involvement in this discussion should be unanimous. I genuinely believe if we go about it this way, it will not be. And this is clearly such an important issue to our community. I just again, if we're fully gonna go against what we were asked to do tonight, we either have to have a very thoughtful resolution that includes kind of every point, or at least the beginning of our points, or we do a letter which does not require full community board approval before we send it, and we bring it up and raise it before the full board. I don't think we can afford to have a mixed vote on this item. Genuinely.
Well, that certainly was an issue with other things relating to restaurants. Shari, with that information, do you still want to move forward with your motion on a resolution?
Yes, I do.
Okay, then we have to vote on that. Elizabeth Ashby, you hadn't had a chance to say anything. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, one of the things I wanted to suggest in the wording is, be at the table obviously doesn't do it. I think what we are asking is that the proposed rules and the environmental impact statement be subject to community board review, as opposed to put the community board at the table. Whichever way you go, I think that makes more sense than be at the table. Be subject to community, all these issues that we want at the table, instead of be at the table, we be subject to community board review.
Okay, it will be crafted in a way that I think will try and make it as strong as possible if there is consensus on this. Okay, so right now there is a resolution on the floor to give community boards a seat at the table. So I wrote everyone's names down. If you want to vote no, I guess is how we've been doing it, then please raise your hands. Boaz, you don't have a vote here. You could lower your hand for now, please. Thank you. Okay, so we have, with me, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people voting no.
We need to let them actually vote, Alita. You can't just assume that their raised hand is.
Oh, that's true. Thank you, Will. Why don't you do the honors then?
Barry, you muted before. Oh, and I muted you. So sorry. Barry, you're muted.
No, that's 3 no's.
We'll only count it once, though. Lori Boris.
No.
John Phillips.
No.
All right, Craig.
No.
And Rebecca.
Abstain.
And then just
Okay,
for
well,
the
count them.
record, let me read all the names into the record. Sherry Weiner, Valerie Mason, Alita Camp, Anthony Cohn, Barbara Rudder, Barry Schneider, Kaz Fagnoletti, Craig Lader, Elaine Walsh, Elizabeth Ashby, Gail Barron, John Phillips, Lori Boris, Marco Tamayo, Michelle Birnbaum, Peter Patch, Rebecca Dangor. Did we miss anyone? Raise your hand if we missed you. Thank you.
Okay, no one raised their hand. So there were 4 noes, 1 abstention. I believe the motion carries for a resolution. Okay, let's move on. Anthony, you wanted to address propane heaters.
Thank you. Thank you, Alita. This is a comment. Not everyone may be fully aware of this, or maybe you are, in which case I was surprised. The city has just passed a law that will allow no new gas permits or no gas permits in new construction, buildings under 7 stories in 2023 and buildings taller than 7 stories in 2027. So after that point, there will be no new gas service to any new buildings in the city. And it is, while the purpose of the bill is to reduce carbon emissions and the use of fossil fuels, at the same time, I think the city has had a kind of constant drumbeat, low percolating series of gas explosions. And it seems to me that on the one hand, saying we don't want any more natural gas in the city, but propane stored in the barriers adjacent to the roadway is just fine, seems to me to be, at least politely put, baffling. And I think that one of the issues that is maybe most important, and it isn't the most important, in what we're dealing with going forward with open restaurants is the whole issue of the permanent open restaurants being really permanent and not even just seasonal. And the idea then that, well, it's cold, so they have to have heat. And well, then we should just have propane heaters. And it seems to me that that's looking at things backwards. And just one other comment of a more general nature. We have a tendency to want to wait until somebody tells us what they want to do before letting them know what we want to do. And I think that every single one of us has opinions on what the open restaurants should be like. I am quite certain that they are very different, but each of us have opinions, and our opinions, because we live here and we work here, are important and are important to the making of the rules. And that's why we should be part of the rule-making process, not just reacting to rules that are handed down from somewhere else. And the issue of a new set of regulations that are in fact uniform throughout the city clearly violates the fact that Manhattan and the Upper East Side are not Forest Hills. And it seems to me that one size fits all just plain doesn't fit. And then on one other tiny point, this is an issue that is so big, it is not really the province of just the Transportation Committee. It is, in fact, important to all of us, because at the end of the day, transportation might not even be involved in the open restaurants program going forward at all. And the fact that they were not designated in the legislation tells us something about doubts that at least some members of the city council have about the ability of the Department of Transportation to actually enforce its own rules. And I think the last 2 years have demonstrated that distrust is not ill-founded. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I don't like territorial disputes and don't see the need for them, but at the last transportation meeting, they were very clear that they did not want to say anything until at least the way I heard it, until the DOT issued rules. So this is a really important topic. 8.5 hours of testimony at the most recent city council meeting attest to that, as does the propane heater. I just want to also say on the propane heaters, they release a lot of carbon dioxide, and the carbon dioxide, and they pose a threat in that way if they are used in an enclosed space. In addition, they just release carbon dioxide, which is a pollutant, as everyone knows. So for those who, just to bear that in mind, I would say more as a regular person, but I won't in this position. Okay, so let's go to Marco, then Michelle, then Craig, and then Rebecca. Marco?
Thank you, Lina. We are going backwards. We're going to become the anti-resilient city. We're going to put the structures completely unsafe. According with FEMA, we expect to have a hurricane EF1. Somebody said, no, we have already Sandy. Sandy just came as a superstorm, so lower than we expect to have it. So if one day it's coming that with these winds and flooding, all this structure that was built, most of them, they built with materials that are designed to be used indoors, not outdoors. So it's rotting most of these materials so far in so short period of time. They use nails with the heat and cold, they try to break down, and these structures become completely unsafe and unsound. This is a serious problem, because if something is happening, who is going to become liable? If somebody gets hurt or die, of the buildings get damaged, who's going to be responsible for that? We have to see a city, a resilient city. That is the most important part. And that is coming the issue of the propane tanks. Right now, if we want to do a restaurant, I do in my business, it takes like 6 to 7, 8 months to pass all the inspections for all the equipment inside of the facility or inside of the restaurants. But now, without no inspections, without no supervision, without no insurance, they put it outside. Simple. Without even mention, like you just said, Alida, about the impact of the quality of air. Yes, I think I had to appreciate what Anthony said at the beginning. The only thing that he was missing is those structures that he mentioned. They have insurance and they pay fees. And these new structures don't pay fees and don't have insurance. Yes, we have an enclosed sidewalk affairs, but it was stopped, no anymore in our community. The rules that DOT creates, apparently they look fair, but I'm seeing what structures that they design, it looks like today. I think Cos make the point very well in that part, and I don't want to repeat. We have to remember, to all of us, we are the densest populations of the people in our community board. So the more people that we have, we need our sidewalks, so nobody can encroach one to another one. So our community, we are reducing our public space. We are decreasing in the quality of the streetscape. We need to have a good streetscape of the quality of the Upper East Side. Some people, they said, no, we have to think. This is all perspective. No, this is something that makes sense. and we had to follow that part. And finally, I'm going to say is about the EIS. The biggest problem that we have to face is the EIS manual. Usually, they don't touch some points. And if you don't reach to the level that they're supposed to do the environmental assessment, they don't take care about that. For instance, I never saw that probably the propane use is addressed on the environmental impact methodology. So we are in serious trouble if we are not at the table, if we are not present our case before they start doing that document. And finally, I'm going to say is, well, there is some rules that DOT creates. Nobody obey, nobody. If you tell me that they follow what the DOT said, well, I will support, but nobody follow that. And DOT, they don't enforce either. So we are we are going backwards. Rather to follow the law, we don't follow that. And that made me feel a little bit uncomfortable. Thank you.
Thank you. So I just, for the future, want to note that one of the things you are addressing is the question of insurance and responsibility for the restaurants that have put structures outside. Because you said, I think, that they don't have insurance on those roadway structures necessarily, or it's not a requirement. Is that correct? I don't know.
I don't know either. I don't think so. In fact, I'm going to mention something else. There is two outside cafes exactly on 85th between 2nd and 3rd Avenue, closer to the 2nd Avenue. It is abandoned and nobody takes care of it. This is garbage in the middle of the street, losing parking. Okay, if they want to do business, well, welcome, do it. But now nobody uses that. It's a garbage. It's a dump. So I think we had to find a liability. Somebody else has to be responsible when they left the Sidewalk Cafe abandoned in that place. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next is Michelle, then Craig.
Okay, let me just say a couple of things. We don't have to be all that concerned about the restaurants having a seat at the table. The restaurants, they have lobbyists that are lobbying as we speak. They are extremely well funded and extremely well represented by the entertainment industry and the restaurant industry. They are having their voices heard loudly and clearly. The only people who are not having their voices heard in the way they should are the residents. And for this, I support everything and agree with everything that Anthony said, so I'm not going to repeat that. I wanted to raise the issue. You talk about propane. If one of the rules, and I understand we're not writing rules today, but if one of the rules were to be that this program be seasonal, say from April to October, you wouldn't need outdoor heating, and that would eliminate the danger of having propane. That could be a rule. The other thing is, there's no guarantee that there's going to be a zoning text amendment any different than the one that currently stands, because that zoning text amendment, the changes were null and void with this Article 78 if it's not appealed and if the Article 78 stands. And there's nothing to say that we have to have a zoning text amendment to have the locations of the outdoor cafes comply with the existing rules. Now, let me ask a question. I don't know if Kaz would know this answer, but in the areas in the city in which cafes are permitted, do we know whether or not every site within the permissible area currently has a cafe? Or is it possible, or is it the case that there are many actual sites where cafes are permitted, or in fact, no cafe exists? Do you know the answer to that, Kaz? Is it completely built out? And I have a follow-up after that.
No, I'm not quite sure, but in the old days, under the DCA rule, people had to apply for the outdoor space. So people were paying. Some restaurants applied for it, some did not apply for it. But under the emergency, it was a free-for-all on the sidewalk that you could not only extend in front of your restaurant, but you could extend either side as long as you had approval. So what you're seeing now is these places that theoretically in the future will have 20 feet, currently have 40, 50, 60, 100 feet of extra space. So some restaurants are hurting, others are really raking it in and laughing all the way to the bank. Was that the question? Was that the question?
Yes, it is. Thank you. So my assumption, and I think it's probably a legitimate one, is that that whole zoning issue is not built out. I think since restaurants had to apply for it under the old rules, and since they had to pay a fee for it, and since they may not have had staff enough to cover outdoors, there may be any number of reasons why a restaurant who was in a cafe area did not apply and so does not have one. So we can still make the assumption and find out if we can get additional information that even if our zoning text amendment remains as it is, and even if there is no change to the zoning text amendment to expand the ability of cafe locations, this program, if it goes into effect, would probably be expanded just because those sites that are not currently used could be used under the original zoning text. So my mind, one of my, like if I were making a list of rules, it would be that we need no additional zoning text amendment, that it should be seasonal, that it should be only in the front of the existing building, that it should be only no structures, that there should be no platforms. In other words, there's a whole series of rules that we can write as a community and make this suggestion before the powers that be finalize the rule. And my last statement is this: in your personal lives, I don't think anybody on this board could tell me that in their personal lives, they saw something coming down the front. Either their insurance premiums were going to be raised, or they were getting a rent raise, or they were getting whatever could be happening in your life. And you knew about it in advance, and you were concerned that it would affect you adversely. Are you telling me in your personal life, you wouldn't try to head it off? You wouldn't call the insurance company or your rent person and try to negotiate with them or offer your point of view? Why this passivity when it comes to this program where the impact is so dramatic in every parts of our lives and every committee that is on this call, whether you support the expansion or you don't support the expansion? This has to do with doing it in the most livable way and taking all the stakeholders into consideration. And why some of you don't want to do that, I hate to ascribe motives, I never do, but I can't help thinking about what you might be thinking. And believe me, I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear why you're choosing to vote against having input. That you flabbergasted me on that one, and any other real opinion, because this is the case when we make our case when we're voting for a yes. I'd like to hear the case made for voting for a no. So if anybody's willing to share some thoughts, I would love to hear them. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. I'd like to, if everyone from the board could just be patient for a moment. There's a member of the public who has his hand raised. So let's just call on Andrew Fine and then go back to you, Craig. Is that all right? You can nod your head. Thank you. Okay, Andrew.
Hi, thank you for taking a moment to listen to this community member. I just want to say that these outdoor spaces should be regulated. They should be, it should be ensured that they're safe, that they meet some fire standards, some electric standards. I've seen everything in these sheds already. They should be safe for crash impact from potential vehicles running into them. They should be limited in space. They should not be able to take up like 3 storefronts when they have 1. And they should also be made for the purpose that they were originally intended, which is for a ventilated place to eat or drink. That was the whole idea of COVID, outdoor dining, not like the indoors brought outdoors into the lanes of traffic. In any case, most importantly, I'd just like to say that the community board should absolutely, positively have a say in this. And I would defer to the likes of Michelle and Alita and Valerie and Elaine. I trust you guys to look out for the community, and I fully recommend your input in the situation. I trust your judgment in making rules for outdoor dining. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your patience, Craig. Go ahead. And everyone else has their hand raised. Craig?
Hi, everyone. So I don't like complaining about process, and I don't like being defensive, but I feel like I have to. So please excuse me for having to do that. So I guess first, to partially answer Michelle's question, I think we handled that last vote entirely inappropriately. It may have strictly followed Robert's rules, if you want to be technical, but it was, I think, sketchy how we effectively pulled a motion in response to a motion to table and avoided a vote on that motion to table, and then effectively reintroduced the motion again and immediately called it to question. So I thought that was a bad look for us, and that's one of the main reasons that I voted no. And then just in regards to this accusation about transportation being territorial, my impression of how we conduct business on our board is that we try to have the committees that have the relationships with the city agencies actually send resolutions to those officials, so that in this case, Transportation Committee would send a resolution that it could go to the Transportation Commissioner and Borough Commissioner and so on and so forth, as they have the ability to respond to those resolutions. And right now, even though there's all this question about who's going to be administering this program, all evidence, at least out in the public domain, suggests that it's a DOT program. So until there's something there that suggests otherwise, that's, I think, the reason why we talk about it coming from transportation, just following CBA procedures that we've practiced in the past. And then just in terms of the comments regarding how we made it clear that we are waiting for rules, that is absolutely not the case. We have been explicit that we want someone from DOT or someone from the city who could speak to how this program is being developed to be able to give us their proposal and discuss potential guidelines. And guidelines are different from rules. I think we're conflating the two here. Just because they're going to come to us with a proposal, we know that they will listen to us and maybe not respond the way we want, but they'll listen to us if they come to us with a presentation, and especially if they do so before the formal rule-making process begins. And I think what this meeting has told me, now that we are 2+ hours into it, is we're going in circles here, just throwing darts, hoping that we score a bullseye in terms of what we're looking to suggest as far as potential recommendations. But again, I go back to my original statement. I just think that we are just going in circles here. We need to come up with an effective process for us to be able to move forward and have a real conversation and be able to have it organized in a way where we could come up with something that may actually have teeth and be meaningful and be able to get something out there. So this is not about not wanting to do something. This is not about being naive and thinking that we need to wait to respond to something. I think we know some of the information and it's out there. And I don't know why we're not actually spending more time looking at what it says on the DOT website in terms of the proposed program and the current regulations that are in place So for example, propane tanks are no longer allowed. And I think it was referred to that this may be a seasonal program. If it is going to be a seasonal program, yes, that changes a lot. I think we also know that there's going to be other aspects of it that I think are going to be things that we've been talking about that are in there, whether it's on the DOT website right now under their description of the proposed permanent program, or the proposed bill that is posted, that I think we all should be able to go through and understand more and be able to respond to that in a little more detail. So I don't know how long we're going to go on with this. I hope that we don't go on all night. I think we need to figure out a pathway forward so we can avoid just inaction or action just for the sake of action, and try to figure out a real way that we could be effective in doing this.
There are.
Can I ask Craig a question?
Can I just, yeah, but just one second, Valerie. There are a lot of issues, and as you know from congestion pricing, where there are a lot of issues about discounts and exemptions and the bridge and the highways, it's very hard to look at just one thing when there are so many of equal weight. Second of all, while transportation does cover a lot, there are plenty of issues such as sanitation and the zoning issues and environmental issues that are not directly related to transportation. If DOT is running it, that doesn't mean that everything is under the auspices, and that's why joint meetings can be really effective. Third, on propane heaters, there is legislation pending right now at the City Council to allow the use and storage of propane tanks and heaters by outdoor restaurants. So it's not a vague, amorphous kind of speculative argument. There is legislation pending that will allow propane heaters. The last mayor said no. This mayor first said yes when he wasn't the mayor, and now I'm not sure if he's revising his opinion, but there are plenty of issues alone about the propane heaters. So there is a lot to be discussed, and part of the reason that to me that it may be important is to have a seat at the table and talk about rules at the very genesis of them, is that they're going with right now a one-size-fits-all program. So 51 council seats, 59 community boards, and the idea of having each of them comment on rules after they're written or after they're mostly written and have that input actually make a difference seems almost impossible to achieve. So maybe there's a solution about one size does not fit all. Maybe it's just having community boards. So that's all I wanted to say about that. Valerie, you had a question for Craig.
Well, I mean, I'm a little bit perplexed what this, for dealing with what this is. I mean, this is by definition, hearing from DSNY tonight, is an interagency rule promulgation, right? So by definition, there are multiple city agencies that are involved. And so just like there are multiple city agencies involved, there are multiple committees on this community board that are considering various aspects of it, which is why I didn't think it was that. I thought it was to have a joint meeting so that everybody who was interested in those topics could discuss it. I agree with you, Craig, that there are plenty of rules that are out there, like according to the affidavit of the Department of Transportation person who's supposed to be the head of the program. She says there aren't going to be any permanent sheds. There are going to be no ceilings allowed. So how does that work? I mean, there's a lot of stuff already out there. So when you say what the process should be, I mean, other than putting something out there for the entire community board to vote on, and having this discussion yet again in even a larger forum, maybe the best thing to do, quite frankly, is to have Julie Menon and Keith Powers come to us and tell us where we're going to have the input. Because I think it's very unclear, even from the agency's point of view, at what point in the process they are at. Because if the court is saying that you need to have the rules down first before you can even put an EIS together, talk about running in a circle. I mean, that's running in a circle right now. So, I mean, Craig, I just like to understand what you mean when you say, what do you see as this process? I'm not against what you're saying, but I mean, it sounds to me like the rules have already been proposed. There's A through P in the affidavit from Julie Shipper from DOT. So, they even say what the fines are going to be.
Do we have those available, or?
It's a public document. She filed her affidavit in support of the program, which was then the court said, even with rules A through P, you don't have enough and you need an EIS.
So where can we find that? Where I think some of us are operating without all the information I think would be helpful for us to be able to have this discussion.
I mean, I all I know is what I saw, what was available online, and that was.
They're all public.
Go ahead, Alita.
I was just going to say they're all public records, so someone could find them. We could post them and send them around because. But I think there's just a lot of confusion, and apparently, as Valerie points out, that affidavit was not enough to convince the judge that. I guess basically what the judge was saying was that you don't have any rules. If you don't have any rules, how could you possibly assess the environmental impact? You need a rule to look at it. And the judge specifically referred to the noise complaints and said, this shows that there is an environmental impact. You can't just sit back and say there isn't any.
Yeah, I mean,
so
I think we can do this, but I'm just saying, Julie Shipper, who's the head of the program, submitted an affidavit which had, 8-foot clear path, 18-inch wide and 30 to 36-inch high protective barriers on only three sides of any seating perimeters that are in roadways. All establishments will be required to clean along the curb line in either direction from the edges of their roadway dining setup. You still have to make an application. And the interesting language that I found, it was basically that, hold on, let me just, sorry, I was scrolling down. Additional city council legislation will be needed to implement the proposed POR program. In early 2022, the city council introduced a bill that would transfer jurisdiction of the licensing and regulation of the cafes from DCWP to DOT and create a new roadway cafe program. This legislation would also provide the processes for review and approval of revocable consents for the POR program. As proposed in the pending legislation, applications for revocable consents to operate sidewalk cafes would be subject to review by affected community boards and the city council.
Right.
Applications for revocable consents to operate roadway cafes would require, this is interesting language, require notifying the affected community board, period. It didn't say anything about, addressing that. So all I'm saying is, I know we don't want to get this beyond what we're talking about. And they're also, just for further information, it says that the proposed law would also require establishments participating in the program to pay an initial license fee of $1,050 for a sidewalk cafe with a renewal fee of $525 and an initial license fee of the same amount, $1,050 for a roadway cafe with a renewal fee of $525. And the term of the license would be determined by TOT through the CAPA process. But it definitely says that there are no quote unquote ceilings allowed, which I believe would do away with these sheds entirely, quite frankly. And it also goes to the fact, the question when we talked about earlier about the garbage. So, I mean, I think we all want to get in on this. I would just like somebody who's, and I think Billy raised an excellent point, what really is the timeline here? And I think the only people who can really tell us that are our elected officials. I mean, to be honest, I think we all think that this is very important. And the only reason I called the question was because I didn't think the discussion was going one way or the other. So we might as well have voted up or down on the motion. But I will say that I really do think we need to have a better idea of the timeline. I hope somebody in government has an idea about what the timeline is. And I think we all have a lot of good thoughts on this. Everyone is interested in one thing, and that is, having our community thrive, both in terms of our businesses and the people who live here. And, we just don't want to miss out. That's the idea. And, somebody needs to be able to tell us that. And maybe it's as simple as Will reaching out to Julie Menon and Keith Powers to get them to send us what the timeline is so that we can react appropriately. And maybe it's also having Russell raise it at the borough board meeting and see what the plan is. I'm done.
No, I appreciate that. I think that's helpful. I think you're definitely, I think we should see if we can get Julie or Keith here or someone. I think that you've helped, I think, clarify a few things, but I think it also clarified the need that we really need to all be on the same page in terms of what our baseline is for us to be able to now move forward with it. Because I think we're going to potentially start to make recommendations and suggestions for things that have already that may be irrelevant or that may have already been addressed and are already going to be done. I just don't know. We can spend days and days trying to come up with something. We could write our own open restaurants program or proposed program and try to provide all the parameters there. But I think there are so many different ways we can do it. I just think we need to have a process in place, because I think we're just going to, if we are just haphazardly trying to attack things now here without a more clear approach, I think we're not going to make any progress.
Well, there are discrete issues, and one of them may well be that community boards will continue to approve or weigh in on sidewalk cafes, but apparently not on roadbed dining. Maybe that's something that's worth discussing, is whether that in fact makes any sense to exclude community boards from that and only to grant irrevocable consent because the fee is paid. Just saying.
Alida, what Valerie said, when we were told about the text amendment and DOT, it was to be, they showed us sketches, diagrams of what should have been. And it was a barrier, 3 sides, open on the sidewalk, 3'6", no permanent structures. That was given by DOT. That was given by the text amendment, the zoning. That's what we voted on. They were the sketches. And if you go back 2-3 years, they will be the sketches that were shown to everybody on what it was to be. And DCA was going to be in charge of the sidewalk with as is now with the board approval. DOT was going to be in charge of the side of the street. So what the Valerie was mentioning, A through P, that no permanent structure, no roof, that was original. That's what everybody was told. But what happened? DOT did absolutely nothing. They didn't even follow their own rules and let everybody do whatever they wanted. That was from the start. DOT did not enforce their own rules. Now they're saying, oh no, this is what it should be. But they never enforced it in the first place. So how can we trust them to enforce them in the future? That's my aggravation with this whole thing.
And I think a lot of people share that, and that's a discrete issue as well, is are we entitled to say, if people choose, that maybe DOT should not be the agency in charge here, should not be the lead agency. Maybe we have a right to say something, if that's what people feel, that it should be a combination of DCAWP and DOT and DSNY and FDNY and a lot of city agencies, and that enforcement, people have been complaining about enforcement by DOT since day one. And it's not as though it's only CBA. People at that 8.5-hour hearing complained vociferously and frequently about the failure of DOT to enforce. That's other people's opinions. So just suggesting that as well. Just there are a lot of discrete issues. There are a lot of things that we don't know what they intend to do, but there are other things where looking at the rules, it's clear what they would like to do, and it's clear how they've been operating, or how people think that they've been operating, and maybe we have an opportunity to say something about that as well. So let's go back to Rebecca and then Elaine. Rebecca? Are you muted? You're not muted. Oh, you're on the telephone. And you're muted on the
connected,
phone. But now you're not. Okay.
So I kind of apologize, although I do feel like the conversation has moved very far away from propane heaters. So my comments are kind of warranted. I will say, I think my motion to table was misconstrued, and I was not fully able to speak to it because that would have been out of line. I think the entire conversation we're having right now is just a testament to the fact that it might have been better to send a letter tomorrow saying we wanted to be involved, because there are so many issues of concern. And I think there are many committees that are not really fully participating here, not at the fault of the co-chairs, because I have a feeling we were all invited. It just like maybe we didn't know. But I remember specifically when they came before us speaking about Lexington Avenue and the fact that I could not get my grandma's wheelchair on the sidewalk next to all of the open restaurants. That's a huge problem. That's public space, right? There are so many things, and I think community involvement is what we wanted. I mean, the last time we voted on this, which was passed, right, we approved it, was the initial stage. And I feel like they're kind of, I don't know, we're in a very difficult situation, and a unified front is what we need. So I think we all need to work together a little bit more and come up with like a very clear, like either we, come up with a plan, which I do think we should all vote on maybe for the first time at the full board meeting, so we avoid the kind of other issues we've faced in similar circumstances about what we want to see, what rules we want to see implemented to be able to like either accommodate this at all or reject it. I think we just need to have a clearer focus, and that's why I thought a letter was better, because I think asserting our need for community involvement is never a bad thing. And I feel very uncomfortable being worried about the fact that we're not going to have a unanimous vote on a resolution that's so simple.
Well, we already don't have a unanimous vote, even at the committee level. And I don't know how to address that. So we do need consensus.
And I don't even know if at this point we can now also propose a letter because of a resolution being ununanimous before. And that's a little bit of a tricky situation, when that could have been a very powerful, I think, tool.
I don't know the answer to that either. Maybe Valerie does. But we do need consensus, and it seems that there are some items that should be easy. As a number of board members have pointed out, the idea of a community voice at the table should be easy. The idea of maybe one size does not fit all. The Upper East Side is not Bedford-Stuyvesant, is not Riverdale, is not Flushing, is not Greenwich Village or the Lower East Side or Harlem. They're all different. Maybe that's something, or maybe there are other things that people want to think about or talk about or vote about. Maybe not tonight. I'm not going to call Casablanca, but at some point they are things that we need to look at, and that we should have consensus, because this really impacts the community, and based on all of the participation today and the people who showed up and at other meetings, it has wide-ranging impact on the businesses, on adjacent businesses, on residents, on sanitation, on ambulances, and those are worth talking about and getting some kind of consensus. So I'm not sure of my point, but I think that there are discrete topics, and then there are topics that wend their way into other things as well. So, Rebecca, is there anything else?
No, not as of yet. I'm sure, I hope we'll continue this discussion in detail in the future.
I think there's a lot of opportunity. Also, with respect to me talking about these at the full board, I think Russell, I've had some conversations with him. I think other people have as well, and he wanted to have discussions at the committee level. So here we are with a number of committees, and this is an opportunity to talk about, I guess, about different issues. Elaine, and then, you know what, Barbara, Elaine, and then let's go to Barbara
No,
Butter.
I'm on.
I just
I've
said
been
so,
waiting.
so go. Go.
I would like to make a motion and then speak to it. I'd like to support a motion that Valerie laid out very articulately based on what the rules, regulations are that are now in place that are being considered. I also want to add to the resolution a whereas that residents are as important to the community as restaurants. And without our residents and their quality of life, we will no longer have community. I think it's important to say that the city rushed in during a crisis and now, in stepping back, have recognized the limitations of some of the decisions that were made and are moving back to what were the regulations and rules for outdoor dining prior to COVID. The regulations that were in place did not impinge on other businesses, residents, or other aspects of the community. And I think it's important that we maintain a quality of life in our city, and in particular in our Ward 8, that enhances the life of those who live here. So I'd like to put that out as a motion, a resolution, I'm sorry, because I am concerned about what has happened to the rush by certain people not to understand what is a neighborhood in a community. Thank you. And I'd like a second on it.
Is there a second?
We got 3 or 4.
I
Thank you.
see there are hands that have been, no, wait a second, Elaine, because there are hands
I
that
got
have been up.
Sherry, Anthony, and Kaz.
Okay, I don't see that, so, okay.
Okay,
Then,
I see.
is there anything?
Anthony's going like this.
He's not on my screen. The only people on my screen are people
Sharon's
with their hands
going
up, but I
like
take,
this.
I
Kaz,
don't
are you
see a
going
thumbs
like
up.
this?
Oh, I see
Kaz
from
is going
Kaz.
like
Okay,
this, okay?
Okay.
And others
So,
are smiling.
Good. A little bit of levity doesn't hurt.
I need it
okay,
at this
so
hour.
then
Thank you.
I think we all need it. Okay, so there's a motion, a resolution, a motion to approve a resolution on the floor. Is there anyone? A lot of people have hands up. Barbara, you haven't had a chance to speak yet. And then Rebecca has her hand up. And then who called the question? Who called the question? You just made a motion and someone
okay, nobody
seconded
called
it.
the question yet.
Nobody called the question
all
yet.
right.
So let's get a little discussion. See if anyone wants to say something. Barbara?
I'll tell you what makes me uncomfortable is this need for unanimous. We've rarely had unanimous except at the simple things. You know, Elaine, nobody's going to disagree that we want quality of life. And for those of us that were in New York, which isn't very many of us, it is me, quality of life was being able to eat outside. And yes, some rules did go through quickly, but we are proceeding ahead and saying, some of us may feel that no outdoor dining is good. Others may feel a lot is good. We have to come to some consensus. And I'm very uncomfortable with the idea that we have to have a letter instead of a resolution because the letter would be unanimous and all. We don't have to be unanimous. And I think that expressing each of our views will come and see what's good or not. None of us feel that how we feel is bad for the community. For those of us that stay in New York and are not in Connecticut or the country or wherever, know that we lived life because we had outdoor cafes. I still am hurting from the fact that we didn't have Park Avenue open, I will say, because I was desperate for it. But things are different now and hopefully will remain different. And I think what we need to work on are the areas that I think you will lead out, whether it should be seasonal, whether we need him. And we're not going to all agree. And I don't think we have to. And I think the people that are saying, let's have a letter instead of this, they're going back and forth. So I hope we respect each other for disagreeing, but that we all want a quality of life. And we don't all agree on what it is.
I'll just say the civility is notable and appreciated. So thank you, Barbara. Kaz?
Call the question.
Second? Michelle's waving, so yes. Okay, so let's call. Will, take charge, please. Oh, Michelle is saying no.
She can vote no.
You can vote no. Is there someone who seconded calling the question?
I think Marco.
Okay, because I can't see that. Okay, then let's go to a vote. Can you lower everyone's hands, Will? And Elaine, could you say for clarity what the resolution precisely is, please?
You want the whole thing? I think we go to YouTube.
Well, I want people to know what they're voting on.
Basically,
I think the whereas was
I'm
clear.
moving to support what Valerie identified as the current rules and regulations as put forward by the city regarding the move towards what is outdoor dining, and supporting that the community have a quality of life that meets what was in place prior to the pandemic. Something like that, but you can get the words off the YouTube.
Okay, so if you are voting no, abstaining, or not voting for cause, please raise your hand. Okay, Will, do you want to? Boaz, again, you don't have a vote here, so you've got to lower your hand, please. Thank you. It's just for community boards, members. Okay.
Okay, so just
Will
to
and
confirm,
Saida?
your hand should only be raised right now if you are voting no, abstaining, or not voting for cause. If you are not voting for one of those things, please lower your hand. And I'll go ahead and read the roll. So we have Elaine Walsh, Valerie Mason, Alita Camp, Kaz Spagnoletti, Anthony Cohn, Elizabeth Ashby, Gail Barron, Marco Tamayo, Peter Patch, Sherry Weiner. And I will start unmuting you now if your hand is raised. So Craig, confirm unmuting.
Well, first point of information, I'm very unclear as to what this actually is. So for the first part, if we're referring to the rules that Valerie was talking about, are we talking about what was in the affidavit and how is that being referred to? And then second, when we talk about the second piece before open restaurants, I'm not clear what the specific language is and what we're saying here in terms of quality of life. Is the implication that quality of life is reverting back to before open restaurants was a thing before the pandemic? I'm not clear as to what the intention is. So I'm hoping someone could clarify that.
Well, it's Elaine's motion, or proposed resolution. So Elaine, do you have clarity on that?
I thought I did clarify it, that yes, it goes back to what the rules were as per what Valerie read, and reflecting on what the rules were for the outside restaurants prior to COVID, which were the rules and regulations that we voted on constantly for restaurants that wanted outdoor or enclosed facilities.
But
Well, then I'm a little confused. Valerie, maybe sorry, Craig, if you could clarify, was the affidavit from the DOT person referring, the rules that you read, were they referring to her view on behalf of the DOT for rules moving forward, or was she repeating the rules that had been in place prior to,
No, she was,
with respect to?
she's talking about rules going forward because you didn't need to pay a fee for the cafe during
Right.
COVID. You got the automatic permit, right, Cos? I mean, you didn't have to
Yes.
pay for any of
Yes.
that.
Mhm.
It was automatic.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the
So
what,
then I'm still confused about the rules that we're talking about, and looking at Craig's face, he might be as well. I'm still not sure what rule, are they rules looking forward that they're writing to be different than the rules before the pandemic, or are you going back to the way the rules were prior to the pandemic? I'm not sure what the resolution is about at this point.
Well, the sidewalk should be as it was before. I mean, that's a given. That's how it always was. And that's what has always been said, that it was going to go back to as it was, with no more permanent structures. All the street was all the diagrams, and as Valerie said, there's no roofs, there's 3 sides fully open. They're all new rules. So anything to do with the street is completely new. Anything to do with the sidewalk is as it used to be prior to COVID.
Okay, so just to reiterate, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Elaine or Valerie, the rules that we're talking about in the resolution are the rules that have been in place with respect to the sidewalk cafes, but recognizing that the roadway rules, or for restaurants that are in the roadway, that they have to be rewritten, they have to be new rules promulgated.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Elaine?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes,
Okay,
I
Craig, is
don't
that
see
clear?
how I'm dragged into this, but okay.
Well,
that's
because you read them and Elaine is busy quoting you right and left.
Oh,
So,
okay.
Craig, is that clear?
that
More
makes
clear?
much more sense, and thank you all for clarifying that. And if that's the case, then I am a no.
Okay,
Thank you.
keep going, Will.
Harry,
No.
Rebecca,
Sorry, Saida, it's you.
Hi, sorry, no, this is just a further point of information. Maybe I'm just missing something. So is this essentially saying that we're backtracking on our initial, like our previous resolution? We don't want any of this to happen. I need to understand.
No,
Is that
it's a new resolution.
They sound different.
They're different.
Well, can
One-
you clarify
one
it
is
for me
to have
again
a-
one more time? I just need to know what I'm voting on.
Go ahead, Elaine.
No, they're different. I don't know.
One- the
Backtracking,
first
the first one we did tonight was that the
No,
community
no,
board
I'm
should be
talking about
involved.
the resolution that we passed in September supporting changing those rules. That's why I'm confused.
No, this is a different resolution.
Michelle? Do you have
2 points.
clarity to bring?
I need some clarity, and let me make a point. Just to clarify, our resolution on the zoning text amendment had nothing to do with rules. This
Right.
board never voted on rules for cafe on the roadway or for cafe in the street. The only thing that we voted on was the zoning text amendment, and this actually proves my point, because I said when the board, I voted against the change, but when the board voted for it, I said they didn't know what they were voting for. And that apparently was true. All they were voting for was to eliminate the zoning text amendment, which clarified where in the city outdoor cafes were permitted. And by eliminating that zoning text amendment, it opened up every area in the city, residential, commercial, or anything else, for sidewalk cafes. There were no rules in it. We have never voted on rules. We have never discussed rules. That's what we voted on. My feeling is it was a mistake, but there it went. We voted to approve getting rid of it. The Article 78, if it's not appealed, has now rendered that decision mute. So that's about the zoning text amendment. Now, I have to say, I still don't understand until Valerie rereads the 9 points or A to P or whatever you did. I don't know what we're voting for. And those particular points are crucial to me, because if it's a given, that we're approving whatever they're talking about in the roadbed, but we're not approving what they're talking about on the sidewalk, I don't want a 3-sided shed in the roadbed. What they are proposing, but it hasn't appeared anywhere formally, is no structures, just chairs and tables and umbrellas. That's what's to be permitted out there. So this resolution, I don't know if you realize it, maybe Valerie should redo the points. I think we're giving in to way more than I'm willing to give into, and we certainly haven't had a discussion on each of these points. So I won't say, that I'm against it, but I don't remember every single point. And from what I'm hearing here, it's agreeing to way more than I'm willing to do. In that case, I would say we have a resolution prior that has nothing to do with this. At this meeting, we passed a resolution that does, to answer Rebecca's question, and I think Valerie will validate this. This does not mean that we at this meeting cannot write a letter about other matters. So if we wanted to put Elaine's points into a letter without specifying what Valerie read, because that's way too specific, but you don't want to you just want to have a letter to please give due consideration to the residents, and without residents, there's no business for restaurant. If you want to go into all that, I could support that. But the way this, from what I'm hearing with this resolution, I think you're making a mistake. And
okay, so
Valerie, the only way to clarify it is if you read it.
Are you a yes or no vote? Because we're
I'm
really
not
in the
voting
vote now.
I don't understand what I'm voting on. You want to reread what you read? You're saying it's applying it. The resolution's about what Valerie read. Okay, read to me what you read. From what I remember, I'm not voting for that.
Well, I honestly, Elaine, I'm not voting for it either.
Okay, all right.
I was just reading what was in the affidavit, because that was what was put forth by the head of the Open Restaurants Program. And I was just giving, by way of example, those were the items that were out there. I was not saying I was for or against them. So
Elaine, withdraw your resolution. We don't know enough about it.
Michelle, I will support what you want. What I think the resolution needs to be that we need to be able to support a residential community and have appropriate outdoor dining that does not impact our way of life, which includes not having the roadbed sheds that we currently have, nor have the facilities that have been built on the sidewalk, which are illegal, that are attached to buildings with no permit with roofs.
Well, I can support that. If you don't refer to what Valerie read, I could support what Elaine said.
I took Valerie out.
I know, that's what I'm saying. You took her out, right?
Okay.
She's unimportant.
But you have to see the wording on this.
No, I
heard the wording.
Listen to what I said.
Okay, I did. I heard it, and from what you said, I can support that. But I want to make sure that that's what's going to be the resolution.
That's it. I said it. I'm on YouTube. I hate it.
Could you just repeat it again, because I'm confused?
Oh, no.
You know what? We need to know because it needs to be in a resolution that I'm hoping someone else will write. And it needs to be clear because it's going to the full board, and people here now need to know what they're doing in order to vote. So please just repeat what you're saying once and for all, and we'll know what we're voting on.
Okay, and if I don't get it perfect, it's on YouTube. The motion is to eliminate roadbed dining as is currently in place and to eliminate it permanently, and to have sidewalk cafes, enclosed or not, follow the old regulations prior to the pandemic, and they cannot be attached to the building with roofs. And just follow all the other regulations that had been in place prior to the pandemic.
Okay, so for clarity, if I may, Eli's on 79th on the northwest corner is attached to the building.
It's
glass
illegal.
windows.
It's illegal.
It's illegal.
It's illegal.
It's been like
illegal.
that since before
79th
the
Street.
pandemic.
Alita, 79th Street is a closed street. It's illegal. As is 72nd, 86th, et cetera, et cetera.
And 77.
And Sojourn are illegal.
And so is 77.
It's been like that for years.
Yes.
No, it
It's
hasn't.
been like that way before.
No, it hasn't, Alita, but that's okay.
Yeah, because I remember walking by and looking at where they put, in the days when the health department would give those letter ratings, that they buried their C on the side of 79th Street, very close to the street level, very close to the concrete, to the sidewalk, not in the front, not near the door. I remember it's been there a long time, but I don't know. It was just a question. Okay.
79th Street,
So-
Eli's is illegal, period.
Okay.
Kaz and I lived there.
So
And Terry Slater, if she was alive, would tell you that.
Okay, so can you raise your don't raise your hands, clap or raise your thumbs or something else if you have any questions about what it is that we're voting on, or ask. Barbara.
Oh, fuck.
Hey, Elaine, we heard that. Barbara.
I'm going to answer one thing that's been bothering me for months, because there's constant talk about 79th Street and Sojourn. That structure may have been used in the nighttime by Sojourn. It was also used by the synagogue for when little kids went back, they were able to get tested and vaccinated and things and all of that in a safe place. And I would like a resolution maybe to say we should have a little heart and understand what we went through during this whole time, and to start picking on little zoning things. And I'm sorry, I'm sick of hearing about Sojourn being terrible. These were people that were able to go to synagogue, that were able to go to the nursery school. And, I just want to say that that's what that tent was. I've never seen it used by Sojourn. I know it was used by the synagogue.
Are you making a friendly? Are you making a friendly amendment, Barbara?
No, I'm making an anger that I'm exploding, and I'm sorry,
Barbara, can I just tell you, we're not talking about a tent. There's an enclosure outside of Sojourn. The tent is a completely different thing.
And
the
also
enclosure is used also by the synagogue.
No, it's
not the tent. There is a permanent structure, and Colleen from DOT has assured me in an email that it will come down, but it hasn't come down. It is a permanent structure.
I've never
fully
seen
built.
one that was separate from the one that was used by the synagogue. And I talked to the parents going in, and I've seen people going in.
It's not the tent. It's not the tent.
I don't know.
It's right in front of the restaurant. It's a permanent structure. Forget the tent. The tent is fine. That will go. But it's a permanent structure they've built in the past month or 2 months illegally with DOT's knowledge.
We've been talking about this for 6 months about the illegal sojourn.
Okay, let's Barbara, you can have this conversation with Kaz or Valerie or someone else who knows the specifics offline, if you could. Let's just focus on the resolution right now that's on the floor. If you are voting no, just raise your hand. your digital hand, Barbara. And okay, go ahead, Saida. And okay, go ahead, please.
Okay, so we're gonna say that if you're voting no, abstaining, or not voting for cause, then your hand is raised. Okay, so John Phillips,
No.
Lori,
As much as we would like, we cannot go back to before the pandemic. An emphatic
Yes or
no.
no? Yes
No.
or no?
No.
Valerie,
I'm a no.
Greg,
No.
Barbara,
No.
Barry,
You heard this before. No.
Rebecca,
No.
Alita,
Abstain.
Of course.
And to go back to the first vote, with 4 noes and 1 abstention, I count there were 18 people at the meeting, so 13 yeses, 4 noes, and 1 abstention. And on this one, Said is counting. I'd like to ask for, I don't know whether this resolution passes or not, on the first resolution that did pass, if there could be someone who would volunteer to write that resolution. Kaz? And Shari, together? I'll take that as a yes. I don't even know if Shari's still here.
That'll teach her.
She's still here. I don't see any objections, so thank you, guys. Okay, we'll wait to hear about this. In the meantime, Anthony? Anthony, your hand's
Move to
raised.
adjourn.
Well, I think
There's
we have
still old and new business.
yeah.
Valerie?
Well, no, I think we had an item of new businesses. Is Judy Schneider on just to mention it? And then we can take
She
it up
is.
at the
She's
next
here,
meeting.
and her hand is raised.
Go
So
ahead,
if you
Judy.
could unmute Judy.
Thank you. While you're waiting for the vote, Julie Menon is sponsoring a bill which has not come before committee yet. It needs to go before committee before it goes to the council. That would require the Commissioner of Small Business Services to create a one-stop shop New York City business portal through which all applications, permits, licenses, and related information needing to open and operate a small business in the city would be available in a single, easy, accessible, and easy to navigate location on the small business website, as well as via a mobile application. I think this is really, really important that we discuss it next month, since it will not have gone before the council. And also, if we pass a resolution to support her motion, perhaps we can encourage Russell to bring it up before the borough board and get the rest of the districts in Manhattan also to support this.
Saida, would you invite Julie to come to the next meeting to address this?
I'd just like to give everybody a little example of something that happened with a restaurant across the street from us. And I got in touch with Will, I got in touch with small business. I got in touch with Julie's office, who got in touch with small business, because the restaurant's all ready to go and has been for some months, and they had to wait 14 weeks for the fire department to come inspect them. And when Julie's office got in touch with small business, and they got after the fire department. Last week, somebody from the fire department came, and they did not have to wait 14 weeks. This is really of vital importance to our businesses. Thank you.
Okay, so maybe we could get Julie to come to the next meeting and address it if you're not proposing it for something that has a time urgency.
Well, I don't know when the committee is going to meet, and I don't know.
I
when
thought
the
you just said there wasn't.
Well, they could schedule a meeting this month, and then who knows when it goes to the council. I don't know that much about how the council functions.
We don't have, is there someone who wants to propose anything about that? We don't have the legislation right here, but the concept of it, if people are willing to do that. Michelle?
No, what I was going to propose is that I hope the office or Judy could send us all the bill so that we can actually read it. And my only question that Judy may or may not know the answer to is whether or not this one portal still involves the multiple agencies, or is it putting all of the agencies together as one new agency? In other words, to distinguish with me between the portal and who it reaches and the new structure, if there is a change.
I can't answer those questions. You can ask Julie or someone from Julie's.
If we get the bill, that should explain it.
This is what I would suggest.
I can send to Will the information that I sent to you, Alita and Valerie, and Will can distribute it to everyone who's on the call who wants to.
But I think it's too early to vote on it tonight.
I do too. So I would suggest that Julie come to the full board meeting and we look at the legislation in advance, and then we could vote on it as new business at the full board meeting next week. And that will give everyone a chance to hear directly from Julie, for her to answer questions if Russell allows, and to look at the legislation in advance. Okay, there are a lot of hands. I don't know if you want to adjourn. I'm just going to ask if anyone wants to say anything about propane. I guess that would be, I can't tell, maybe a no. So let's just go to Marco.
Thank you. About the program that is mentioned already, they used to have an agreement between the Department of Buildings and the Small Business Administration that usually when the project as a restaurant, I'm talking about the restaurants, they put this in a fast track. The review of the zoning, building codes and everything usually was made by the Small Business Administration, which used to be plan examiner from DOB. And they speeded up the applications, and it has been working very well. But now DOB, they changed their strategy and no longer they use that. But we used to use this program that they accelerate, especially the issue of the approvals. And the Small Business Administration usually step in right away to help the applicants and all the small business usually to be approved quickly. And that was available for the entire city, not only for Manhattan, but it was for the whole city. The small administration used to work with all the agencies, helping the applicants. In my case, myself as an applicant, usually they help me a lot. And the plan examiner, usually they understand what is the situation and they approve right away. So this program used to have it. But DOV, I think they stopped. I don't know why, I don't have no idea. And now it's no longer available, that service. That's the only thing I want to clarify in that part. Thank you.
Thank you. Gail?
The
Okay,
department is, thank you. the Department of Small Business Services in the past used to have a portal where they had consolidation of all the different city agency requirements and permits and all. So I have a feeling that that's probably what they're going to do, and maybe they're going to be able to create something that actually streamlines what the whole process is. And that's why I agree with everybody that we should look at the bill and know what it says before we make any determination. Thank you.
Gail, since you're familiar with the original or the older version of the portal or the proposed portal, could you just look at whether there are any differences? And if there are, could you just either send around an email or speak to it at the full board meeting? Okay,
Absolutely.
Thank you. And Barbara?
I'm sorry if I'm grouchy. I wasn't grouchy before I got on. I had the best day, so I'm sorry. But I have to say, I will absolutely vote no on any resolution that comes in front of new business. This is something that affects small businesses. It's something that should be on the agenda. If the chair wants to put it as an agenda item where somebody speaks about it, that's one thing. But to bring it up when there's no discussion, when one or two people look at the bill, is just not a good process.
Well, that's why we're not doing it tonight.
But you want to do it at a full board meeting when there won't be much discussion about it, or it won't be.
Why wouldn't there? Well, then I don't know if, you know what? I don't know. Judy, well, I mean, sorry, Judy, it's not your responsibility. Will or Saida, I don't know who's on. Saida, if you could look into whether there's some kind of time frame, and if it's not a time frame where we need to vote next week, then I think Barbara's right, and we should look at this at the next small business meeting. If there is an urgent time frame and it looks like it's going to be helpful, and Gail has information that could help with the, I mean, she may have with the board looking at it and ascertaining whether it's useful or not, then we could wait and have a more extended discussion. Suits you, Barbara? Good. Judy?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. If we could put it on the agenda for next month, not put it off for months. I don't think by next month that they're going to get it to the council and it'll get voted on. I think we have enough time to have a full discussion next month, and everybody
good.
have a chance to look at it.
Okay, that's what I was trying to ask before, and I guess I wasn't clear. Okay, so then Gail, some of the time frames, the time pressure is off you, and we will put it on the agenda for next month. Saeed, if you could send around the legislation to everyone, maybe just everyone on the board as part of this, and if you could extend an invitation to Julie. Okay, anything else that's new business? Any old business? I know, reverse order. Okay, there was a motion to adjourn. It was seconded, and I'll say then that the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for coming and staying and offering all of your guidance and insights. Have a good week. See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.